What if Deku had all for one? That's the question we're diving into in this dark and gripping alternate universe story set in the world of My Hero Academia. In this version of the story, everything changes. Izuku Midoriya doesn't become the symbol of hope, instead, he inherits the most feared power in history. This tale explores what happens when the line between hero and villain begins to blur, and when the weight of unimaginable power threatens to consume even the purest heart. Expect deep character conflicts, broken alliances, high-stakes action, and emotional choices that will challenge everything you thought you knew about Deku. With intense inner struggles, moral dilemmas, and a battle between light and darkness, this isn't just a fight for survival. It's a fight for identity, purpose, and redemption. So if you're ready for a story filled with twists, drama, and a darker take on the MHA universe, you're in the right place. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any part of this exclusive series. Let's get into it. This is What If Deku Had All for One. Chapter 1, The Inheritance of Power. The stench of ozone and stale fear clung to Izuku Midoriya like a second skin. It was a smell he'd become intimately familiar with in the seconds since the sludge villain had enveloped him, its viscous body pressing in, suffocating, crushing his bones. His lungs screamed for air, his vision blurred at the edges, and the world spun in a dizzying kaleidoscope of green sludge and desperate, failing light. This is it, he thought, a final, despairing whisper from the deepest part of his soul. This is how it ends. Quirkless. Helpless. Just like I always was. He thrashed, uselessly. His fingers, numb and weak, scrabbled at the thick, unyielding mass. He was going to die. Not in some glorious, heroic sacrifice, but choked by sewage, a forgotten footnote and a villain attack. The irony was a bitter taste on his tongue, even as it filled with the foul liquid. Then, a sudden, explosive gust of wind, a force so immense it ripped through the villain's gelatinous form. A figure emerged from the chaotic spray of slime, a silhouette against the sun, towering and magnificent. All Might. The symbol of peace. Izuku's hero, his idol, here to save him. Hope, raw and incandescent, surged through Izuku's veins, momentarily eclipsing the terror. Detroit Smash. All Might roared, a sound that vibrated through Izuku's very bones. The blow was concussive, not just to the villain, but to the very air around them. The sludge villain exploded outwards, reduced to harmless splatters across the alley walls, and Izuku, dislodged and gasping, tumbled to the grimy asphalt. He lay there, coughing, sucking in great gulps of air, the world still tilting, but alive. He was alive. All Might, impossibly large and bright, stood over him, steam rising from his formidable frame. "Are you all right, young man?" His voice was a booming reassurance, a promise of safety in a world of danger. Izuku pushed himself up, still trembling, tears of relief and awe stinging his eyes. "All Might. You saved me." The hero chuckled, a sound like distant thunder. "Indeed. But you shouldn't have been caught in the first place. This is no place for a civilian. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must deliver this villain to the authorities." He began to gather the scattered remnants of the slime, deftly scooping them into empty soda bottles. Izuku's heart pounded, not just from the near-death experience, but from the proximity to his hero. This was his chance. The question that had burned in his chest for a decade, the desperate plea he'd never dared voice aloud, clawed its way to his throat. "Wait, All Might," he gasped, scrambling to his feet.
I have to ask you something."
All Might paused, a golden eyebrow raised. "Make it quick, young man. Time is of the essence." Can someone like me? Can I be a hero?" Izuku blurted out, the words tumbling over each other, raw and desperate. His eyes, wide and earnest, pleaded for an answer, for a flicker of hope. "Even if I don't? Even if I don't have a quirk?" The air in the alley seemed to still. All Might's broad shoulders seemed to slump, just perceptibly. The booming cheerfulness in his eyes dimmed, replaced by something softer, sadder. Izuku's heart plummeted. He knew that look. It was the same look his mother had given him, the same look the doctor had given him, the same look his classmates gave him. Pity. All Might sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "Young man. Being a hero. It's a dangerous profession. One that requires immense power, the ability to control it, and an unwavering strength of will. He looked down, his gaze distant, lost in thought. Without a quirk. Without that fundamental foundation. It would be almost impossible to keep up. To truly save people consistently and reliably. Izuku's world fractured. The light in his eyes flickered, then died. It wasn't a harsh rejection, but a gentle, pragmatic truth, delivered by the very embodiment of heroism. And that made it sting even more. It wasn't that he couldn't try, it was that it was futile. His dream, nurtured through countless notebooks and a lifetime of admiration, was a fantasy. A delusion.
I see, Izuku whispered, the words tasting like ash.
His head bowed, the curly green hair obscuring his face. The tears that had been tears of relief moments ago now flowed freely, hot and bitter. He tried to blink them back, to hide them, but they wouldn't stop. It's not to say you can't help people, All Might continued, his voice a little softer. There are many ways to be a hero in this world. As a police officer, a doctor, a firefighter. Those are all noble paths. But to stand on the front lines, to face villains head on. That requires a quirk. The hero clapped him gently on the shoulder, a gesture meant to be comforting, but which only served to emphasize the gulf between them. Now, I really must be going. Stay safe, young man. And with a final, booming laugh that sounded strangely hollow to Izuku's ears, All Might launched himself into the sky, a golden blur shrinking against the clouds. He was gone. Izuku stood alone in the alley, the lingering stench of slime and his own crushed hopes filling the oppressive silence. The sun, which had seemed so bright moments ago, felt like a cruel mockery. His legs felt like lead, his arms hung heavy at his sides. The notebooks he clutched to his chest, filled with meticulous notes on heroes and their quirks, suddenly felt like a childish joke. Useless. Quirkless. Deku. The voices of his tormentors, of Bakugo, of the doctors, of the society that had labeled him, echoed in his mind. He had always tried to ignore them, to hold on to his dream with a tenacious, if naive, grip. But now, even All Might, his ultimate beacon of hope, had extinguished it. He walked aimlessly, his feet carrying him through the familiar streets, yet he saw nothing. The vibrant city, once a source of inspiration, now seemed dull, its hero-filled skyline a painful reminder of what he could never be. He passed the street where Kachan had been cornered by the very same villain, a brief flicker of concern, then a return to his own despair. Someone else will save him. Someone with a quirk. His path led him, inexplicably, to a deserted, crumbling section of the city, a forgotten industrial district where derelict factories cast long, skeletal shadows. The air grew colder here, filled with the scent of damp earth and decay. It was a place where hope itself seemed to wither. He stopped, leaning against a rusted fence, its sharp edges biting into his arm, but he barely felt it. His gaze drifted to the broken glass of a factory window, reflecting his tear-streaked face, distorted and pathetic. A hero, huh? He mumbled to his reflection, a dry, humorless laugh escaping his throat. Who was I kidding? A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the ground beneath his feet. The air grew heavy, charged with an unfamiliar energy. Izuku, lost in his misery, barely registered it until a shadow, deeper than the encroaching twilight, seemed to detach itself from the deepest recess of the abandoned factory. It was a figure, tall and gaunt, yet possessing an undeniable aura of ancient power. He was cloaked in darkness, his face hidden by a grotesque, bird-like mask that seemed to absorb the light. His eyes, or where they should have been, were pinpricks of malevolent red, burning with an unnatural intensity. He walked with a deliberate, unhurried pace, a silent predator emerging from the shadows. Izuku's breath hitched. His survival instincts, dulled by despair, screamed at him. This was not a hero. This was something else. Something terrifying. The figure stopped a few feet from him, the silence between them thick and suffocating. Izuku instinctively recoiled, his back pressing against the cold, hard metal of the fence. Every fiber of his being urged him to run, but his legs were rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear. Then, a voice. It was not loud, but it resonated deep within Izuku's skull, a low, gravelly rumble that felt like the earth itself speaking. It was ancient, weary, yet imbued with an almost unbearable power. So, the voice mused, its tone oddly detached, considering the terror it inspired. The symbol of peace still preaches his hollow dogma. The boy, quirkless, abandoned, yet clinging to a foolish dream. Izuku gasped. How did this man know? He hadn't said anything aloud since All Might left. The masked figure tilted his head, as if listening to a distant echo. I heard your heart, boy. Your despair. Your longing. It resonates, does it not? With the very essence of this world, where power dictates all. Who? Who are you? Izuku stammered, his voice barely a squeak. A dark, chilling chuckle emanated from behind the mask. A simple man, young Izuku. One who understands the true nature of strength. One who sees the potential even in the discarded. Izuku flinched at the use of his name. This was impossible. You desire power, do you not? The voice continued, a silken thread weaving its way into Izuku's mind. The power to protect. The power to stand tall. The power to be a hero, as you so naively dream. Izuku's eyes, still glistening with unshed tears, snapped up to meet those terrifying red pinpricks. The words struck a chord deep within him, a forbidden chord he had just convinced himself was broken. But the world, and even your vaunted symbol, has told you it is impossible, the voice purred, a predatory satisfaction in its tone. They tell you to abandon your dreams, to settle for a lesser existence. Because you lack a quirk. The word, spoken by this chilling entity, seemed to mock him, yet also offer a strange validation. This man understood. What if I told you, the figure continued, stepping a fraction closer, the air growing colder, that I could give you what they deny you? Not some meager, inherited gift, but a true inheritance. Power beyond your wildest imagination. Power that can reshape this world. Power that can make you anything you wish to be. Even a hero, in your own twisted way. Izuku's mind reeled. This was madness. This was a villain. He knew it instinctively. But the offer. The promise. It was a siren song to his broken spirit. What? What do you mean? Izuku whispered, his voice hoarse. The masked figure extended a hand, long, pale fingers tipped with unnatural nails. It was a gesture of invitation, yet also of absolute dominance. My quirk, young Izuku, is called All for One. It allows me to take the quirks of others, and to bestow quirks upon others. For generations, I have curated a vast collection, a symphony of abilities. And now, I am looking for an heir. Izuku's eyes widened to impossible saucers. All for One. The legendary villain. The antithesis of All Might. The ultimate evil. He had heard the name in whispers, in hushed tones, a boogeyman from history. And he was standing before him. Offering him his power. Why? Why me? Izuku stammered, fear warring with a terrifying, forbidden curiosity. Because, young Izuku, All for One said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, you are unique. Quirkless, yes. But your mind. Your meticulous observations, your analytical prowess, your unwavering desire to understand strength. These are qualities I value above all else. You see the world as it truly is, not through the rose-tinted glasses of hero worship. And your despair. It is a fertile ground for growth. You are a blank slate, unburdened by the societal expectations of a gifted quirk. You can be shaped. He paused, letting his words sink in. I have watched you, Izuku Midoriya. You crave to save. To help. To be significant. All admirable traits, even if misguided by others. Imagine, then, the good you could do with true power. Not a single, limited quirk, but an arsenal. The power to truly change things. To enforce your own justice. To save everyone, even those the heroes abandon. The words were poison, yet they sounded like truth. Izuku's mind was a maelstrom. All for One was a villain. He was evil. But All Might had just told him his dream was impossible. And this entity, this harbinger of darkness, was offering him the impossible. But what would it cost? Izuku's moral core, bruised but not yet broken, screamed in protest. What? What would I have to do? Izuku asked, his voice barely audible, betraying the immense internal battle raging within him. All for One's lips, hidden by the mask, seemed to curl into a smile. Only this: accept my gift. Learn from me. Become my successor. Together, we will correct this broken society. We will forge a new order, where power is truly recognized and wielded by those capable of mastery. And you, Izuku, will be at my side. Or rather, you will stand above it all. He held out his hand again. This time, a faint, purplish-black tendril of energy seemed to snake from his palm, pulsating faintly. It was mesmerizing, terrifying, and utterly compelling. The choice is yours, young Izuku, All for One said, his voice a dangerous lullaby. Remain quirkless, insignificant, and watch your dreams wither. Or embrace true power, and forge your own destiny. A hero. Or something far greater. Izuku stared at the hand, at the tendril of dark energy. His mind raced, 1,000 thoughts colliding. His mother's tearful apology. Bakugo's sneering face. All Might's pitying words. The years of being invisible, of being laughed at, of being Deku. And the dream. The dream that had just been shattered. If he accepted, he would be walking a path of darkness. He would be aligning himself with a force of evil. But if he didn't, he would be nothing. Still nothing. And the thought of that. It was a black hole, pulling him down, drowning him. His gaze flickered to the night sky, now devoid of All Might's shimmering silhouette. Alone. He was utterly, completely alone. And then, a tiny, almost imperceptible shift within him. A seed of resentment, long buried beneath layers of forced optimism, began to sprout. Resentment at a world that had deemed him worthless. Resentment at heroes who preached ideals but couldn't offer a hand to the truly helpless. His own desperate yearning for salvation twisted into something sharp, something dangerous. What if the path of light was truly closed to him? What if this was his only way to gain the power to do something? To stop the bullying, to protect those weaker than himself, to be a hero, but on his own terms. He reached out, his hand trembling, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. His fingertips brushed against the purplish black energy, and a jolt, unlike anything he had ever experienced, shot through him. It was cold and hot, sharp and dull, agonizing and exhilarating all at once. All for One's grip was surprisingly gentle as he closed his hand around Izuku's. The tendrils of dark energy pulsed, growing stronger, snaking up Izuku's arm, consuming him. A scream tore from Izuku's throat, not of pain, but of sheer, overwhelming sensation. It felt as if countless individual consciousnesses, countless lives, countless abilities, were being forced into his very being, tearing at his cells, rewriting his DNA. Visions flashed before his eyes, a man igniting flames with a thought, a woman phasing through walls, a child manipulating gravity, a beast with razor claws. All of them, their quirks, their essence, flooding into him. He fell to his knees, convulsing, his body racked by an unimaginable torment. He could feel his own inherent quirklessness being overwritten, replaced by a roaring, chaotic symphony of stolen powers. It was too much. His mind fractured, unable to process the deluge. All for One watched, impassive behind his mask, a grim satisfaction emanating from him. Embrace it, young Izuku. Let the chaos consume you, then make it your own. This is the true meaning of power. The process felt like an eternity, though it was likely only minutes. When it finally receded, Izuku lay gasping, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead, his body twitching with residual energy. He felt different. Profoundly, irrevocably different. The world seemed sharper, colors more vibrant, sounds more distinct. And within him, a vast, echoing space, filled with a swirling, turbulent energy. He could feel them. The quirks. 1,000 whispers in his mind, each promising a unique ability, each demanding attention. It was overwhelming. Congratulations, Izuku Midoriya, All for One's voice resonated in his mind, no longer from outside, but from somewhere deep within his own consciousness. A terrifying intimacy. You have truly inherited all for one. Izuku tried to speak, but only a ragged cough escaped him. He pushed himself up, his limbs feeling strangely heavy, yet imbued with an unnatural strength. He looked at his hands, expecting to see some visible change, but they were still his own, albeit trembling slightly. Yet, he felt the power. It hummed beneath his skin, a latent storm waiting to be unleashed. Now, all for one continued, his voice still echoing in Izuku's mind, the real training begins. The next few months were a blur of pain, frustration, and an education far removed from any textbook. All for one, as a mentor, was ruthless. He demanded perfection, absolute control, and an understanding of power that went beyond simple application. He was patient in a chilling way, never raising his voice, never showing outward frustration, but his expectations were absolute. "Feel it, Izuku," all for one would command, his voice a whisper in Izuku's ear, even when the villain was physically across the room. "Reach deeper. Do not merely use the quirk. Become the quirk." Izuku started with basic abilities. Kinetic Booster, a simple quirk that multiplied his physical strength and speed, was the first he managed to consciously activate. It was terrifying. He'd accidentally shattered concrete walls, ripped through metal, and left craters in the abandoned training grounds all for one had chosen. He had no fine control, no subtlety. It was like wielding a sledgehammer when he needed a scalpel. Insufficient, all for one would drone, watching from the shadows. A blunt instrument. What good is power if you cannot wield it with precision? Try again. Izuku would try, sweat stinging his eyes, muscles aching, a headache thrumming behind his temples from the sheer mental effort. He discovered that activating a quirk wasn't just a physical act, it was a mental one, a subtle shift in his internal energy, a connection to the vast reservoir within him. And each quirk felt different, demanded a different kind of focus. Air Cannon, a quirk that allowed him to unleash powerful blasts of compressed air, proved equally challenging. His first attempts were weak puffs, then uncontrolled explosions that leveled sections of the dilapidated buildings. All for one forced him to refine it, to condense the air, to shape the blast, to control its velocity and impact. He spent hours, days, repeating the same motions, feeling for the nuances, until he could blow a single leaf off a distant tree without disturbing the others. But the real challenge, the true horror, was the sheer volume of quirks. There were so many. A cacophony of latent abilities clamoring for recognition. All for one rarely allowed him to access the more powerful or complex ones, deeming him unprepared. Instead, he forced Izuku to cycle through the simpler, less volatile ones. Finger extension. Weight manipulation. Small magnetism. Minor regeneration. He had to learn to activate them, control them, and then seamlessly deactivate them. A true master of all for one does not simply wield a single power, all for one explained during a rare break, his voice devoid of emotion. He orchestrates a symphony of abilities, combining them, layering them, adapting them to any situation. Each quirk is a tool. You must understand its purpose, its limits, and its interaction with others. He was teaching Izuku to think like a villain, to strategize not just with his body, but with his very essence. The darkness began to creep in. All for one's philosophy, insidious and subtle, began to chip away at Izuku's naive understanding of the world. He spoke of heroes as flawed, as bound by rules that often led to greater suffering. He spoke of society as a fragile construct, built on the illusion of peace, easily shattered by those with true strength. "Look around you, Izuku," all for one would say, gesturing to the ruined cityscape they trained in. "This decay. This abandonment. It is the result of a system that prioritizes image over substance. Heroes fight villains, but do they ever truly solve the root causes? No. They perpetuate the cycle, ensuring their own continued relevance." Izuku, exhausted and vulnerable, found himself listening, contemplating. He saw the slums on his walks home, the casual discrimination against those with weak or villainous quirks, the bureaucratic inefficiency that sometimes led to innocent suffering. All for one wasn't wrong about some things. The world was flawed. But his solutions? They were horrifying. One evening, After Izuku had spent hours mastering a minor disintegration quirk, carefully turning a dead leaf into dust without affecting the ground beneath it, he collapsed, gasping for air. "You are improving, Izuku," All for One's voice drifted over him. "Your capacity for adaptation is admirable. Now, tell me, what have you learned today?" Izuku pushed himself up.
I learned that even small quirks can be powerful if used precisely.
And that controlling the flow of the quirk is more important than just activating it. Good. And what else? Izuku hesitated.
I was thinking about what you said.
About heroes. And how they don't fix everything. All for One's visible form seemed to subtly shift, a pleased hum radiating from him. Indeed. They are performers, Izuku. Distractions. True change requires a different approach. But isn't it still wrong to hurt innocent people? Izuku blurted out, the question tearing at him. He still clung to that. His core morality. Innocent? All for One scoffed, though the sound was devoid of true scorn, more like detached amusement. Define innocent, boy. Are the quirkless innocent for being born without power, or guilty of weakness in a world that demands strength? Are the heroes innocent for upholding a system that benefits them while others suffer? Are the villains innocent for seeking to survive, even if by unsavory means? Izuku recoiled. The relativistic argument struck him, unsettling his foundations. He had always seen things in black and white. Heroes good, villains bad. But All for One painted a world of murky gray. Sometimes, Izuku, the ancient voice continued, a greater good requires difficult choices. Sacrifices. The removal of obstacles. If 100 lives can be saved by sacrificing one, is that not a heroic act? Even if the one resists? This was the slippery slope. Izuku felt it. He shook his head, trying to clear the insidious thoughts. No. That's not right. That's what villains do. And what do heroes do? All for One countered softly. They send young men and women into battle, knowing some will die. They impose their will on society, often with destructive collateral damage. The difference, young Izuku, is merely one of perception. And who controls the narrative? Izuku fell silent. He couldn't argue. Not effectively. His mind, already reeling from the physical and mental exertion of quirk training, was too vulnerable. All for One was slowly, meticulously dismantling his moral framework, brick by agonizing brick. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Izuku's body hardened, adapting to the constant influx of energy and the demands of training. He grew taller, his once scrawny frame filling out with lean muscle. His eyes, once bright with innocence, now held a haunted, calculating depth. He was still Izuku, the boy who dreamed of saving people, but that dream was now twisted, corrupted by the immense, dark power he wielded and the pervasive philosophy of his mentor. He started developing an uncanny intuition for quirks. He could sense their flow within himself, identify them, and even, with immense concentration, subtly alter their properties. It was a terrifying, exhilarating talent. "You are beginning to truly understand," All for One observed, a rare note of genuine satisfaction in his voice. "The capacity for synthesis. The ability to manipulate the very fabric of quirks. This is why I chose you. You are not merely a vessel, Izuku. You are a true successor." One day, All for One brought him to a hidden vault, deep beneath the earth. It was a vast chamber, filled with strange, pulsating machines and rows of capsules, each containing a dormant, living quirk. It was a museum of stolen power. "These are my finest acquisitions," All for One stated, his voice almost reverent. "Each represents a pinnacle of its kind. And in time, they will be yours. But first, you must learn to harvest." Izuku paled. "Harvest? What do you mean?" All for One gestured to a small, isolated chamber where a terrified, struggling man was chained to a chair. His body glowed faintly with a low-level vibration quirk. "He is a petty thief," All for One explained, devoid of judgment. "He will not be missed. You will take his quirk." Izuku stared at the man, his heart seizing in his chest. "No. I can't. That's That's barbaric. It is a necessity, All for One countered, his voice firm, unwavering. You cannot truly master All for One until you understand its true nature, the acquisition of power. You must learn to take, as well as to wield. But he's a human being. Izuku protested, his voice cracking. The ethical boundary he'd been fighting to maintain was about to be obliterated. He is a collection of cells, animated by a unique energy, All for One corrected. His existence is inconsequential compared to the vastness of the power you can attain. His quirk is a drop in the ocean. Yet, it is a drop you must learn to claim. Izuku refused. He dug his heels in, his inherent goodness roaring to life, overriding the fear and the insidious whispers. He would not become a monster. All for One simply watched him, patiently. You will, Izuku. Eventually. For now, observe. And then, to Izuku's horror, All for One demonstrated. He approached the bound man, his hand glowing with the same purplish-black energy Izuku had felt when receiving All for One. The man screamed, a guttural, terrifying sound, as the energy enveloped him. Izuku watched, transfixed by a horrifying fascination, as the man's body withered, his skin shriveling, his eyes losing their light. He became a husk, his life force, his very essence, drained away. And as he died, the glowing energy, the vibration quirk, flowed into All for One. Izuku retched, stumbling back, his mind reeling from the brutality. He had seen villains on TV, but this was cold, calculated murder. The systematic destruction of a life for power. A necessary process, All for One said, turning back to him, his voice as calm as ever. You see now? This is the true nature of All for One. The strong take from the weak. It is the law of this world. And you, Izuku, will be among the strongest. The experience scarred Izuku, leaving a deep, festering wound in his soul. He had witnessed something unforgivable, and a part of him wondered if, by accepting All for One, he had already become complicit. He had not taken the quirk, but he had benefited from the system that allowed it. Despite his horror, the training continued. All for One began to discuss his long-term plan, the infiltration of hero society, the eventual overthrow of All Might, and the establishment of a new order. And central to this plan was Izuku Midoriya. You will attend UA High School, All for One declared one day, an almost imperceptible hint of amusement in his tone. The premier hero academy. You will learn their methods, understand their weaknesses, and gather intelligence. And when the time is right, you will tear it all down from within. Izuku stared, dumbfounded. UA, the very school he had longed to attend. The pinnacle of heroism. Now, he was to enter it as a Trojan horse, a weapon aimed at its heart. But how? Izuku stammered. I can't just walk in there with All for One. They'll know. Of course not, All for One said, a subtle shift in the air around him. You will present a manageable quirk. Something powerful enough to gain entry, but not so overwhelming as to draw unwanted scrutiny. Something that appears to be yours. He then, with a terrifying precision, bestowed upon Izuku a specific combination of quirks he had prepared. Not All for One itself, but a derived set. Impact Recoil, a quirk that allowed him to absorb and redirect kinetic energy, and Minor Super Strength, a controlled boost to his physical power. These, combined, would give the illusion of a formidable, yet understandable, individual quirk. You will master these, and only these, for the entrance exam, All for One instructed. The others, the true vastness of All for One, will remain dormant. A secret weapon, for when the time is ripe. Izuku felt a wave of nausea. He was to lie, to deceive, to infiltrate. His dream of UA, once a beacon of light, was now shrouded in shadows. The training for the UA entrance exam was brutal, focused entirely on perfecting his control over impact recoil and minor super strength. All for One taught him to blend them seamlessly, to make it appear as a single, powerful quirk. He also drilled him relentlessly on strategy, on observation, on exploiting weaknesses. It was a darker, more calculating version of the hero analysis he used to do, now applied to combat scenarios with a chilling efficiency. The day of the UA entrance exam arrived, a stark juxtaposition of bright sunshine and Izuku's internal turmoil. He stood before the imposing gates, the symbol of heroism, feeling like an imposter. Students milled around, chattering excitedly, their faces alight with hope and anticipation. Bakugo, as always, was a loud, aggressive presence, pushing past others. "Move it, Deku!" Bakugo snarled, bumping shoulders with Izuku. "Don't block my path to greatness, you quirkless loser." Izuku flinched, his blood running cold at the familiar insult. For a split second, a powerful urge surged through him, to unleash a fraction of the true power simmering within, to wipe that arrogant smirk off Bakugo's face, to finally make him understand the true meaning of fear. He felt the kinesthetic booster flicker, the air cannon hum. But then, All for One's voice, calm and insistent, echoed in his mind. "Patience, Izuku. Retribution is a dish best served cold. And subtly. He will learn his place soon enough. For now, observe. Control." Izuku took a deep breath, forcing himself to suppress the surge of dark energy. "Keikachan," he mumbled, stepping aside, his gaze downcast, feigning his usual timid demeanor. It was a painful lie, but a necessary one. The written exam was, surprisingly, easy for Izuku. His years of obsessive hero analysis, combined with All for One's ruthless intellectual drills, had honed his mind to a razor's edge. He aced the theoretical questions, understanding the physics of quirks, the legal frameworks of heroics, and the psychology of villains better than most of the applicants. The practical exam, the combat simulation against villain bots, was where the true test lay. He stood among the throng of hopefuls, his heart thumping, not from fear, but from a calculated excitement. This was his stage. This was where he would begin his infiltration. Present Mike's booming voice explained the rules: accumulate points by destroying villain bots of varying sizes. 0-pointers were merely obstacles. As the gates burst open, the students surged forward, unleashing their flashy quirks. Izuku, however, hesitated for a moment, observing. He noted the choke points, the distribution of bots, the most effective strategies. He then took a deep breath and activated his prepared quirks, impact recoil shimmering faintly around him, and a surge of minor super strength hardening his muscles. He moved, not with the reckless abandon of his peers, but with a precise, almost clinical efficiency. A 2-pointer bot lumbered towards him. He didn't dodge. Instead, he met its punch head-on, allowing impact recoil to absorb the kinetic energy. The force rippled through him, and with a grunt, he channeled it back, unleashing a devastating counter-punch infused with his minor super strength. The bot crumpled, circuits sparking. He moved from bot to bot, his movements fluid, almost graceful. He used impact recoil to nullify blows from larger bots, sending them careening into their brethren, creating chain reactions. He utilized minor super strength to leap onto buildings, delivering crushing blows from above. He was precise, minimizing collateral damage, saving others from falling debris, yet never drawing too much attention. He was an efficient machine, calculating every move, every punch. He saw Bakugo, exploding his way through bots with raw power, leaving a trail of destruction. Bakugo looked frustrated when Izuku, without a word, redirected a flying piece of shrapnel that was about to hit him, unknowingly saving him. Izuku simply continued his methodical destruction, his face a mask of focus. Then, the ground trembled. A colossal 0-pointer, taller than the surrounding buildings, burst forth, its massive limbs crushing everything in its path. Panic erupted among the remaining students, most fleeing in terror. Izuku felt the urge to run, but then he saw her. The girl who had saved him from falling earlier, Uraka Ochako, trapped under debris, unable to move, directly in the 0-pointer's path. Her eyes were wide with fear, staring up at the approaching behemoth. His training with All for One, his new calculating mindset, screamed at him to ignore her. She was a distraction, a liability. The 0-pointer was worth 0 points. There was no benefit in engaging. But she's going to die. A primal instinct, a spark of the old Izuku, flared within him, momentarily overriding the cold logic of All for One. He remembered his dream. To save people. Even if this power was tainted, even if his path was twisted, that core desire still lingered. He clenched his fists. Impact recoil and minor super strength surged to their maximum. He ran, sprinting towards the zero-pointer, a tiny, defiant figure against the colossal threat. He reached Uraka, his enhanced strength easily lifting the heavy debris. "Are you okay? Can you move?" "My leg," she cried, pain etched on her face. "It's pinned." The zero-pointer loomed over them, its massive foot descending. There was no time. Izuku had a terrifying, desperate idea. He reached out with all for one, a tendril of purplish-black energy, thin as a thread, snaking out. He didn't take a quirk. He accessed one. A rarely used, highly volatile quirk he had only briefly experimented with in training, energy discharge. It was a pure, explosive burst of raw kinetic energy, difficult to control, prone to backfire. All for one's voice, sharp and urgent, cut through his mind. "No, Izuku. Too risky. Use your assigned quirks." But Izuku ignored him. He wrapped Uraka's arm around his shoulder. "Hold on tight," he yelled, and with a burst of minor super strength, he pulled her free, his hand releasing a focused, directed burst of energy discharge at the rubble. The debris disintegrated in a flash of light and sound, giving them just enough room to roll clear. The zero-pointer's foot slammed down where they had been moments before, shaking the entire city block. Izuku didn't hesitate. With Uraka safely behind him, he focused his entire being. He needed to stop it, to buy time for her to escape, even if it cost him everything. He channeled all of his strength, all of the kinetic energy absorbed by impact recoil, and then, he poured the raw, uncontrolled power of energy discharge into his fists. He leapt, a desperate, impossible leap, aiming for the zero-pointer's head. "Smash!" he roared, a primal sound born of desperation and the sheer overwhelming power he now wielded. It wasn't All Might's cry, but it carried a terrifying echoes of it. His fist connected. Not with a clean impact, but with the devastating, uncontrolled eruption. The energy discharge, amplified by his strength and the stored recoil, exploded outwards. A blinding flash of light consumed the zero-pointer's head, followed by a deafening roar. Metal screamed, circuits overloaded, and the giant robot staggered, then began to topple, slowly at first, then collapsing with a ground-shaking crash. Izuku, his arm burning with residual energy, pain lancing through his bones, plummeted towards the earth. His impact recoil wasn't enough to nullify the sheer output of his own uncontrolled attack. He was falling, fast, towards certain death. Suddenly, a light touch. Uraka, despite her injured leg, had touched him. "Release," she cried, activating her zero-gravity. Izuku felt weightless. He floated down gently, landing softly beside her, his body trembling, exhausted, but alive. "You saved me," Uraka gasped, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. You were amazing." Izuku could only nod, his breath still ragged. He had done it. He had saved someone. Even with this dark power, even on this twisted path, he had still, for a moment, been a hero. All for one's voice, however, was not pleased. "Foolish, Izuku. Unnecessary risk. You almost exposed everything. You could have been killed." "But I saved her," Izuku thought, a defiance, small but potent, flaring within him. He felt a flicker of pride, despite the chilling scolding in his mind. The acceptance letter from UA arrived a week later. It was delivered by a hologram of All Might, looking slightly less imposing on the screen. He praised Izuku's courage, his quick thinking, and his powerful quirk. He even showed the video of Izuku destroying the zero-pointer, highlighting it as a display of a true hero spirit. Izuku watched the hologram, a hollow ache in his chest. All Might saw him as a nascent hero, a worthy successor to the ideals of peace. He had no idea what truly lay beneath the surface. He had no idea that the power Izuku wielded was a twisted mirror image of All Might's own. All for One's instructions continued, now focusing on Izuku's role within UA. He was to observe, to learn, to analyze his classmates, to identify potential weaknesses, and to slowly, subtly, gather more quirks. Not through outright theft, not yet, but through careful manipulation, through borrowing from the weak, or the foolish. He was to be the perfect sleeper agent. "Remember, Izuku," All for One reminded him before the first day of school, his voice firm. "You are there to learn, yes. But also to dismantle. Every lesson they teach you, every strength you witness, every bond you forge. All of it will be fodder for our ultimate goal." Izuku nodded, a grim determination setting in. He hated the deception. He hated the lies. But he had chosen this path. He had accepted the power. Now, he had to see it through. He would walk among the heroes, a wolf in sheep's clothing, and try, somehow, to find a way to reconcile the darkness within him with the light he still, stubbornly, clung to. The first day at UA High School was a whirlwind of sensory input. The towering building, the bustling hallways, the excited chatter of students, each one radiating a unique quirk signature. Izuku, now hypersensitive to these energies thanks to All for One, felt a constant, low thrum beneath his skin, the ambient power of so many quirks in one place. It was both exhilarating and overwhelming. He found his way to Class 1A, the hero course. The door was massive, designed, he suspected, for students with larger-than-life quirks. He pushed it open, stepping into a room filled with faces that would soon become famous, or infamous. His eyes immediately landed on Bakugo Katsuki, already in a heated argument with a stern-looking boy with glasses and an overly rigid posture, Tenya Ida. Ochako Uraka waved at him from her desk, a warm smile on her face. A boy with half-red, half-white hair, Shoto Todoroki, sat silently, radiating an aura of detached power. Izuku felt a surge of conflicting emotions. These were his classmates. His peers. The future of hero society. And he was here to destroy it. He took his seat, attempting to appear calm, but his mind raced. All for One's voice was a low hum in the back of his consciousness, pointing out quirks, analyzing their potential, reminding him of his mission. Their homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa, a man who looked perpetually exhausted, revealed himself to be Eraserhead, a pro-hero known for his quirk-nullifying abilities. He wasted no time, immediately launching into a quirk apprehension test. "You've been wasting time chatting," Aizawa drawled, his eyes sweeping over the class, making Izuku feel transparent. UA is not a place for leisurely fun. The test began. Izuku watched, analyzing each quirk, each student's technique. He had to be careful. He couldn't unleash All for One's full potential. He had to stick to the impact recoil and minor super strength persona. In the 50-meter dash, he utilized a burst of minor super strength to propel himself forward, then allowed impact recoil to absorb the impact of his landings, effectively giving him a burst of speed. He came in second, just behind Ida. In the grip strength test, he focused minor super strength into his hand, squeezing the dynamometer until it cracked, a slight tremor in his hand. He deliberately held back, not wanting to shatter it. He still managed an impressive score, far beyond what a normal human could achieve. The long jump, the side-to-side steps, the ball throw, Izuku performed admirably, always staying within the bounds of his fabricated quirk, always observing his classmates. He saw the sheer power of Bakugo's explosions, the versatility of Uraka's zero gravity, the raw force of Kirishima's hardening. Each one, a potential acquisition. Each one, a potential threat. When it came to the ball throw, Bakugo blasted his ball into the distance, screaming, "Die!" at the top of his lungs. Izuku felt a familiar prickle of annoyance, swiftly suppressed. Then it was his turn. Izuku walked to the circle, the soft ball in his hand. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the power of impact recoil hum around him, the contained surge of minor super strength within his arm. All for One's voice was a subtle whisper. "Show them just enough. Aizawa is watching. He will be looking for anomalies. Do not overdo it. But do not underperform. A delicate balance." Izuku took a deep breath. He wound up, and with a controlled surge of power, he threw the ball. It soared, a small speck against the blue sky, propelled by a force far beyond human capability, yet still within the believable range for a powerful emitter quirk. The device registered the distance, 705.3 meters. A collective gasp went through the class. Aizawa's eyes, normally half-lidded, were wide open, his quirk-nullifying gaze fixed on Izuku. Izuku felt a brief, terrifying sensation of his power flickering, as if Aizawa was trying to erase All for One. But All for One was too vast, too deeply ingrained. Aizawa could only scratch the surface of his visible, derivative quirks. He suspects something, All for One warned. Be careful, Izuku. Do not draw his full attention. Izuku nodded imperceptibly. He had passed the test, garnered respect, and successfully infiltrated. But the true game had only just begun. The days that followed at UA were a constant tightrope walk. Izuku had to maintain his persona, the diligent, analytical student with a powerful, yet somewhat predictable, quirk. He had to be cautious, never revealing the true depth of his abilities, never allowing All for One to fully manifest. He found himself gravitating towards Uraka, feeling a strange sense of protective responsibility towards her after the entrance exam. She was genuinely kind, optimistic, and seemed to bring out a flicker of his old self. He also found a peculiar, uncomfortable fascination with Bakugo. His rival, his tormentor, was now an unwitting pawn in a much larger game. Bakugo's raw, untamed power and fiery ambition were something All for One seemed to observe with interest, even admiration. That boy, Katsuki, All for One would muse in Izuku's mind as Bakugo exploded past him in training. He possesses a drive, a hunger for supremacy. A valuable quality. Perhaps, in time, we could utilize him. The thought sent a shiver down Izuku's spine. Utilizing Bakugo. Turning him into a tool. The idea was abhorrent, yet All for One spoke of it with such detached pragmatism. The USJ incident was the first major deviation from the established timeline, a chilling prelude to the war to come. All for One had been planning this attack for months, a deliberate test of his apprentice, a chance to gather intelligence on All Might's dwindling power, and a public display of the League of Villains' burgeoning strength. Izuku was instructed to participate in the class, to observe, and if the opportunity arose, to subtly assist the villains without exposing his true allegiance. He was a double agent, a spy within the very heart of hero training. When the warp gate opened and the mass of villains poured into the USJ facility, chaos erupted. Izuku felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He knew these villains, or at least, he knew of them. Shigaraki Tomura, the petulant, destructive leader. Kurogiri, the warp gate user. And the Nomu, a terrifying bioengineered weapon, a symbol of All for One's cruel science. He was warped to the conflagration zone with Todoroki and Yaoyorozu. His heart pounded. This was real. Lives were at stake. The heroes were under attack. Todoroki, cold and efficient, immediately froze the villains, demonstrating his immense power. Yaoyorozu, equally capable, began creating tools. Izuku, however, found himself torn. All for One's instructions were clear: observe. Do not engage unless necessary. Protect your cover. But the villains were attacking. They were hurting people. He saw a group of thugs trying to flank Todoroki. Without thinking, Izuku unleashed a precisely controlled burst of air cannon, one of the many quirks All for One had in practice, though not one of his assigned ones for UA. It was a subtle deviation, but in the chaos, hopefully unnoticed. The blast scattered the villains, knocking them off balance just enough for Todoroki to encase them in ice. Careful, Izuku, All for One warned, a faint reprimand in his voice. Do not let your impulses dictate your actions. Stick to the plan. The plan. The terrible, dark plan. They regrouped with the others in the central plaza. And then, he saw him. All Might. Bursting through the glass dome, a beacon of hope, but to Izuku, he looked weaker. His movements were slower, his form fluctuating more frequently. All for One's words echoed in his mind: his time is running out. He is weakening. The fight between All Might and the Nomu was brutal, a clash of titans. Izuku watched, his analytical mind working overtime, noting every blow, every flinch, every subtle sign of All Might's struggle. He saw the Nomu's shock absorption, its incredible strength, its terrifying regeneration. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that this creature was designed specifically to counter All Might. As the fight escalated, Izuku found himself struggling with an intense moral dilemma. He was supposed to observe. He was supposed to let the fight play out, to allow All Might to be pushed to his limits, exposing his weakness. But then, he saw it, All Might, struggling, losing ground, his power visibly diminishing. And he saw Shigaraki, his twisted fingers poised to decay Tsuyu Asui and Minoru Mineta, who were trying to help. Protect your classmates, All for One had said, almost as an afterthought, knowing that keeping Izuku's cover intact was paramount. Do not let them die needlessly. That would attract too much attention. It was a flimsy justification, but Izuku clung to it. He had to act. But how? He couldn't openly fight alongside All Might, not without betraying everything. When Kirishima, Bakugo, and Todoroki engaged Shigaraki and the Nomu, it bought All Might a precious few seconds. But the Nomu was relentless, pressing its advantage, pushing All Might further. Izuku made a snap decision. He accessed a quirk he had never used in combat, one All for One had meticulously taught him for precise, non-lethal application, pressure manipulation. It allowed him to subtly increase or decrease the atmospheric pressure in a small area. He also accessed vibrational feedback, a minor quirk that gave him sensory information through vibrations. He focused, his eyes darting between the battling figures. As the Nomu lunged, its massive fist aimed at All Might's head, Izuku unleashed a focused burst of pressure manipulation directly onto the Nomu's arm. Not enough to stop it, not enough to be noticed by All Might or the villains, but just enough to throw its aim off by a fraction of an inch. The Nomu's punch, instead of a direct hit to All Might's temple, scraped across his jaw. Still a devastating blow, but not a fatal one. All Might roared, taking the hit, but used the slight deviation to deliver a counter-punch that sent the Nomu reeling. Subtle, Izuku. Very good, All for One approved, a faint ripple of satisfaction in Izuku's mind. A perfectly executed intervention. Not too much, not too little. Deniable, yet effective. Izuku felt sick. He had helped All Might, yes. But he had done so in the service of All for One's plan. He was becoming exactly what All for One wanted him to be, a manipulative, calculating pawn, capable of wielding immense power for nefarious ends, all while maintaining the facade of a hero. The fight continued, culminating in All Might unleashing a desperate, overwhelming United States of Smash, finally defeating the Nomu. Shigaraki, enraged, attacked with his decay, but was interrupted by Bakugo's timely intervention. Then, the true heroes arrived, Aizawa and 13 having been rescued. Shigaraki and Kurogiri were forced to retreat through the warp gate, swearing vengeance. Izuku watched them disappear, a cold knot forming in his stomach. He had just witnessed the first true battle between the forces of light and darkness, and he, Izuku Midoriya, had been on both sides. The duality of his existence was becoming unbearable. After the USJ incident, the atmosphere at UA became more somber, more focused. The threat was real. Heroes needed to be stronger. Izuku, however, found himself drifting further into isolation, consumed by his internal conflict. He found it increasingly difficult to relate to his classmates. They spoke of justice, of saving people, of becoming heroes. He spoke of the same, but the words felt hollow on his tongue, tainted by the knowledge of what he truly was. All for One's guidance became more frequent, more demanding. He instructed Izuku to analyze his classmates' quirks, their fighting styles, their personalities. He encouraged him to observe their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities. It felt like a perverse version of his old hero analysis, now twisted into a tool for dismantling. The girl, Uraka Ochako, All for One would prompt. Her zero gravity. Potentially devastating in close quarters. But she seems limited by her nausea. Find a way to exploit that. Or, if she were to join us, a way to mitigate it. Bakugo Katsuki, he continued. Explosion is formidable. But his temperament, his overconfidence, his tunnel vision. These are glaring flaws. He relies too heavily on raw power. How would you counter him, Izuku, if you were to face him without All for One? Izuku would dutifully answer, his mind automatically processing the information, creating strategies, even as his conscience screamed in protest. He was becoming a living weapon, his analytical mind a targeting system for All For One's insidious plans. The sports festival approached, a high-profile event designed to showcase the students' talents to pro-hero agencies. All For One saw it as an opportunity for Izuku to further establish his cover, to demonstrate his fabricated quirks, and to gain invaluable combat experience against a wide variety of opponents. "You will excel, Izuku," All For One declared. "Not too overwhelmingly, but enough to stand out. Let your impact recoil and minor super strength shine. But do not forget the lessons of the USJ. Subtlety is key." Izuku trained harder than ever, not just his physical quirks, but his mental fortitude. He practiced suppressing the overwhelming presence of All For One within him, compartmentalizing the vast array of stolen powers, ensuring only his assigned quirks were accessible. It was a constant battle, a mental gymnastics routine designed to keep his true nature hidden. The sports festival began. The atmosphere was electric, a stark contrast to Izuku's internal gloom. The first event, the obstacle race, was a chaotic scramble. Izuku used his enhanced speed and strength to navigate the terrain, relying on impact recoil to absorb blows from other students and minor obstacles. He passed the 0-pointers from the entrance exam by leaping over them, showing agility rather than destructive power. He made it to the final round, among the top qualifiers. The cavalry battle was next, a team-based event where students formed groups and fought for headbands. Izuku, as the student with the 705.3-meter ball throw, automatically had a 10 million point headband, making him the prime target. He tried to assemble a team. Uraka immediately volunteered, her bright optimism a stark contrast to his inner turmoil. Tokoyami Fumikage, with his shadowy quirk Dark Shadow, and Hatsume, a brilliant support gear inventor from the support course, joined them. It was a powerful team, albeit one led by a boy hiding a monstrous secret. As the battle commenced, Izuku found himself relying on his team. Uraka's zero gravity allowed them to evade, Tokoyami's Dark Shadow provided defense and offense, and Hatsume's gadgets offered unexpected mobility. His internal monologues during the chaos were a maelstrom of conflicting thoughts. He had to win, for his cover, for All For One. But he also wanted to win for his team, for Uraka's faith in him, for Tokoyami's quiet trust. All For One's voice was a constant presence. "Observe Todoroki, Izuku. His half-cold half-hot quirk is a force of nature. But he is unbalanced, favoring ice. Identify his tells. Identify the openings." Izuku found himself focusing on Todoroki's team. He saw the cold determination in Todoroki's eyes, the latent anger that fueled his power. He knew, from All For One's analysis, the tragic backstory that made Todoroki reject his father's flame. It was a weakness, a vulnerability that All For One instructed him to exploit later. But for now, it was a source of unexpected pity for Izuku. In the final moments of the cavalry battle, Todoroki's team attacked, a devastating combination of ice and mobility. Izuku, in a desperate move, used impact recoil to nullify the ice blast, his team working seamlessly to snatch a headband. They qualified for the final round. The final tournament. One-on-one battles. This was where heroes truly shone. This was where Izuku had to walk the finest line. His first match was against Hitoshi Shinso, the general studies student with a brainwashing quirk. Shinso, bitter about his villainous quirk, tried to provoke Izuku, knowing his weakness. Izuku, however, had been warned by All For One. The mind is a powerful weapon, Izuku. But it can also be a fragile one. Do not engage with words. Silence is your best defense against such a quirk. So, when Shinso spoke, Izuku simply nodded, or moved his head, never uttering a word. He frustrated Shinso, forcing him to engage physically. Izuku used his controlled minor super strength and impact recoil to push Shinso out of bounds. He won without speaking a single word, leaving Shinso frustrated and the audience confused. His next opponent was Shoto Todoroki. This was the match All For One had been waiting for. "This is crucial, Izuku." All For One's voice was sharper now, more insistent. "Todoroki is a prime candidate. He has the power, but also the resentment. Break him. Force him to use his fire. Make him confront his past. Show him that his strength lies not in denial, but in embracing all aspects of his power, even the tainted ones. Izuku walked into the arena, the crowd roaring. He faced Todoroki, whose eyes were cold, distant. The match began, and Todoroki unleashed a colossal wave of ice, instantly transforming the arena into a frozen wasteland. Izuku stood his ground, channeling impact recoil to its maximum, letting the ice slam into him, absorbing its chilling force. He then countered with a burst of minor super strength, shattering the ice around him. The battle was a dance of ice and brute force. Todoroki attacked relentlessly with his ice, building walls, sending sharp projectiles. Izuku met each blow, absorbing, redirecting, pushing back with powerful, precise strikes. He held back on his internal quirks, relying only on his fabricated persona. But as the battle wore on, All for One's whispers grew more insistent. He is holding back. He is refusing to use his fire. Break him, Izuku. Show him the necessity of using all available power. Just as you have learned. Izuku knew what he had to do. He saw the struggle in Todoroki's eyes, the silent battle against his own power, his own father's legacy. And in that moment, something shifted in Izuku. He saw not just a target, but a kindred spirit, someone grappling with a power they despised, a power that defined them. He saw himself. He dodged another ice attack, his body aching from the constant absorption. Todoroki, he yelled, his voice raw, echoing across the stadium. Stop holding back. You're shaking. Use your full power. Todoroki flinched, his eyes widening. What are you talking about, Midoriya? I'm talking about your fire. Izuku screamed, pushing his minor super strength to its limit, launching himself forward, a desperate, powerful punch aimed at Todoroki. It's your power, isn't it? Not his. It's yours. Todoroki hesitated, a flicker of raw emotion crossing his face. And in that moment, for the first time in the fight, a faint wisp of flame flickered on his left side. No, Izuku. Not like that. All for One's voice was a furious roar in his mind, his plan unraveling. You are not supposed to inspire him. You are supposed to break him. Izuku ignored the voice. He saw a desperate opening, a chance to reach Todoroki, not as a pawn of All for One, but as a fellow human being struggling with a burden. Come on, Todoroki, Izuku yelled, his voice filled with an intensity born of his own internal turmoil. Give it everything you've got. This is your power. And then, it happened. Todoroki's left side erupted in a torrent of brilliant flames, illuminating the arena, melting the ice. He stood, finally, a unified force, his full power unleashed. Izuku felt a strange mixture of triumph and dread. He had helped Todoroki, pushed him past his self-imposed limits, allowed him to embrace his full potential. He had, in a twisted way, been a hero. But he had also, unknowingly, strengthened a future opponent for All for One. Todoroki unleashed a colossal wave of fire and ice, a devastating attack born of his unified power. Izuku knew he couldn't stop it with just impact recoil and minor super strength. This was too much. For a split second, he considered unleashing a more powerful quirk from All for One's arsenal, something destructive that would win the match decisively. He felt the hum of energy discharge, the raw power of air cannon calling to him. But then, he thought of Uraka's smile, of the genuine camaraderie in Class 1A. He thought of his mother's quiet strength. He thought of the terrified man whose quirk All for One had taken. He couldn't become that monster. Not here. Not now. He made a different choice. A hero's choice, even if tainted by a villain's power. He met Todoroki's combined attack head-on, not to defeat it, but to absorb and redirect it, to lessen its impact. He poured every ounce of his fabricated quirks into the defense, his body screaming in protest. He used impact recoil to absorb the kinetic energy of the ice, and a surge of minor super strength to create a shockwave against the flames. The collision was monumental. A blinding flash of light, a deafening roar that shook the entire stadium. The air crackled with raw power. When the dust settled, Izuku was outside the ring, having been blown back by the sheer force of the blast. Todoroki, still standing in the center, was battered but victorious. Izuku lay there, coughing, his body racked with pain, but a strange sense of peace washed over him. He had lost. But he had not succumbed to the darkness. He had pushed Todoroki to his limits, and in doing so, had reaffirmed a small, defiant part of his own morality. "You failed, Izuku," All for One's voice was a chilling whisper, laced with cold fury. "You had the opportunity to crush him, to break his spirit, and you chose sentimentality. This weakness will be purged." Izuku closed his eyes, ignoring the internal reprimand. He had lost the match, but he felt a different kind of victory. He had fought the darkness, even if only for a moment. Recovery Girl healed him, scolding him for his recklessness. His classmates praised him for his fight, for pushing Todoroki. He accepted their words, feeling like a fraud, yet also feeling a warmth, a connection, that he hadn't thought possible anymore. The aftermath of the sports festival, particularly the match with Todoroki, became a turning point in Izuku's twisted journey. All for One was furious, his disappointment a suffocating weight in Izuku's mind. "Your sentimentality, Izuku, is a dangerous flaw," All for One reiterated, his voice colder than usual. "It blinds you to opportunity. It weakens your resolve. I chose you for your intellect, for your adaptability, not for your lingering moral compass. That must be excised." The training intensified. All for One focused less on raw power and more on psychological conditioning. He forced Izuku to analyze historical events, not from a heroic perspective, but from the viewpoint of those who wielded power, those who manipulated, those who dominated. He made Izuku read texts on strategy, on coercion, on the systematic dismantling of established orders. "Heroes rely on public trust, on reputation," All for One explained, showing Izuku projections of heroes' approval ratings, their public perception. "These are their vulnerabilities. Learn to exploit them. Learn to plant seeds of doubt. A society that doubts its heroes is a society ripe for change." Izuku felt himself being pulled further down the rabbit hole. He was still attending UA, still playing the role of the aspiring hero, but his mind was becoming a battleground. He would sit in class, listening to All Might's lectures on heroism, and simultaneously, All for One would be deconstructing every word, pointing out the hypocrisy, the naivety, the potential for exploitation. He saw the flaws in Heroes' society more clearly now. The over-reliance on a few powerful individuals, the emphasis on flashy quirks over practical skills, the inherent classism of the quirk system. All for One's arguments, once easily dismissed as villainous propaganda, now held a disturbing kernel of truth. During his internships, Izuku chose to intern with Gran Torino, not out of any particular respect for the old hero, but because All for One had identified Gran Torino as All Might's former mentor, a valuable source of information on the symbol of Peace's fighting style, his weaknesses, and his past. Gran Torino was a harsh, unforgiving teacher, reminiscent of All for One in his demanding nature, but utterly different in his philosophy. He drilled Izuku relentlessly on agility, on precision, on quick thinking. He taught Izuku how to control his movements, how to think on his feet, how to react instinctively. He pushed Izuku's body to its limits, but in a way that built him up, not broke him down. "You've got raw power, kid, that's for sure," Gran Torino grumbled during one of their sparring sessions, as Izuku barely managed to block a lightning-fast kick. "But you're still clumsy. Like a bull in a china shop. Power ain't nothing without control. And a purpose." Purpose. Izuku inwardly winced. His purpose was All for One's purpose. Gran Torino also taught him to observe, to anticipate, to read an opponent's movements before they even made them. He trained Izuku's mind as much as his body, honing his analytical skills to an even sharper edge. The encounters with the hero killer, Stain, were another pivotal moment. Izuku, Gran Torino, and Todoroki found themselves confronting Stain in Hasu City. Stain's philosophy, while extreme, resonated with some of the cynical views All for One had ingrained in Izuku. Stain saw heroes as hypocrites, as self-serving individuals, corrupted by fame and money. He believed only truly selfless heroes were worthy. Izuku fought alongside Gran Torino and Todoroki, using his impact recoil and minor super strength to counter Stain's terrifying speed and blades. He was forced to unleash a burst of air cannon to save Todoroki from a paralysis attack, a controlled, yet still powerful, blast that deflected Stain just enough. Dangerous, Izuku, All for One warned, but acceptable. You are protecting an asset. And his zealotry against heroes. Observe it. Learn from it. He is a crude instrument, but he understands the flaws in their system. The fight was brutal. Stain was an overwhelming force, his ideology driving him to terrifying extremes. Izuku found himself struggling, not just physically, but morally. He despised Stain's methods, his willingness to kill, but he also recognized the kernel of truth in his condemnation of hero society. In the end, they managed to subdue Stain, but not before the hero killer delivered a powerful speech, his eyes burning with conviction, condemning false heroes. The speech, amplified by the media, sent shockwaves through hero society, causing public opinion to waver, just as All for One had predicted. You see, Izuku? All for One's voice was triumphant. A single fanatic, with a powerful enough ideology, can sow seeds of doubt that heroes cannot easily dispel. The cracks are appearing. And you, my boy, are poised to widen them. Izuku felt a chill deeper than any wound Stain had inflicted. He was becoming an instrument in this grand, horrifying plan. He was learning to see the flaws, not to fix them, but to exploit them. The line between right and wrong blurred further with each passing day. He was Izuku Midoriya, the aspiring hero. But he was also All for One's successor, a walking arsenal of stolen power, a living lie. And the weight of that lie was slowly crushing him. The provisional hero license exam loomed large, a significant hurdle in Izuku's path as a double agent. All for One viewed it as another opportunity for Izuku to prove his value, to demonstrate his ability to manipulate situations, and to further establish his standing within hero society. This exam is not merely about combat proficiency, Izuku, All for One lectured, his voice a low thrum in Izuku's mind during a quiet moment. It is about adaptability, teamwork, and more importantly, public perception. You must appear heroic, decisive, and capable of saving lives, even under pressure. Your success will reinforce your credibility among the heroes, making you an even more valuable asset. Izuku trained with his classmates, participating in the joint training sessions. He continued to use only his impact recoil and minor super strength, carefully calibrating his power output to be impressive but not suspicious. He observed his classmates, noting their quirks, their teamwork dynamics, and their individual strengths and weaknesses, dutifully reporting them back to All for One. It felt like a betrayal with every observation he made. The exam itself was a chaotic simulation of a disaster scenario, with various villains and civilians, actors, to deal with. The first phase involved a free-for-all, where students used target balls to hit each other's weak points. Izuku, surprisingly, found himself adopting a more strategic approach, much to All for One's satisfaction. He used his enhanced agility and strength to avoid direct confrontations, observing the chaos, and then striking at opportune moments. He would use impact recoil to deflect incoming balls, sending them back at opponents, and minor super strength to close distances quickly. He even found himself helping his classmates, not out of heroism, but out of a twisted pragmatism. When Bakugo and Kirishima found themselves overwhelmed by a group of skilled opponents, Izuku, from a distance, subtly used a small burst of air cannon, a quirk he still kept hidden from public view, only using it in controlled, chaotic situations, to create a sudden gust of wind, disorienting their attackers just enough for Bakugo to unleash a powerful explosion and escape. You demonstrate foresight, Izuku, All for One praised, his voice a chilling approval. Protecting your allies is a wise move. It maintains your cover. It builds trust. Trust is a powerful weapon when wielded against one's enemies. Izuku felt a wave of self-loathing. He was becoming good at this. Good at deception. Good at manipulation. The line between his true self and the persona he was forced to maintain was blurring. He passed the first phase with ease, among the top students. The second phase involved rescue operations during a simulated disaster. Buildings were collapsing, fires raged, and victims cried for help. This was where Izuku's internal conflict reached a fever pitch. His inherent desire to help, to save, clashed with All for One's cold instructions to prioritize observation and strategic positioning. He saw a group of students struggling to move a massive concrete slab to free trapped civilians. All for One urged him to observe, to note their limitations. But Izuku couldn't stand by. He moved forward, used his immense minor super strength to effortlessly lift the slab, his impact recoil shimmering as he braced for the weight. The other students stared, amazed at his raw power. "Are you all right?" Izuku asked the rescued civilians, his voice genuinely concerned, even as All for One scoffed in his mind. Sentimental fool. Efficiency, Izuku, not emotional grandstanding. He saved more people, using his speed and strength to pull them from rubble, to guide them to safety. He even subtly used a minor vibrational sense quirk, one he kept deeply hidden, to detect unstable structures before they collapsed, guiding rescue teams away from danger. He was a silent, unacknowledged force, manipulating the situation to maximize safety and efficiency, all while keeping his true powers deeply veiled. He passed the provisional hero license exam with flying colors, earning his temporary hero license. The sense of accomplishment was hollow. He was now an officially sanctioned hero, a legitimate member of the system he was destined to dismantle. The school festival. A brief, almost idyllic respite from the grim realities of heroics and villainy. All for One allowed Izuku this diversion, seeing it as an opportunity for Izuku to further integrate himself into the hero community, to form bonds that could later be exploited. Observe the nature of their cohesion, Izuku, All for One instructed. Understand what binds them together. Emotions, shared experiences, a common goal. These are their strengths, but also their vulnerabilities. Izuku, strangely, found himself enjoying the festival. He practiced the dance for Class 1A's cultural performance, feeling a camaraderie with his classmates that was both comforting and agonizing. He saw their smiles, their laughter, their genuine excitement. For brief moments, he could almost forget the darkness that lay beneath his skin, the villain's voice in his head. He saw Eri-chan, the traumatized little girl saved from overhaul, finally smiling, experiencing joy. Her innocent joy pierced through Izuku's hardened exterior, reminding him of what he was fighting for, of the pure desire to save, untainted by power or manipulation. It was during these fleeting moments of normalcy that Izuku's internal monologues grew more desperate. He longed for a way out. He yearned to use his power for good, truly good, without the insidious guidance of All for One. But he was trapped. He had the power, yes, but it came with a chain, binding him to its original wielder. The attack by Gentle Criminal and La Brava, though minor in scale compared to the USJ, served as a stark reminder of the fragile peace. Izuku found himself confronting Gentle Criminal alone, forced to use a slightly wider array of his fabricated quirks to counter Gentle's elastic powers. He utilized impact recoil to absorb the elasticity, minor super strength to break through his defenses, and even a fleeting, highly controlled burst of air cannon to deflect an attack. All for One's voice was a steady undercurrent. Efficient. Adaptive. You are learning, Izuku. You held back, yes, but only enough to maintain your cover. You are becoming a master of controlled exposure. Izuku hated the compliment. He didn't want to be a master of controlled exposure. He wanted to be a hero. He defeated Gentle Criminal, ensuring the school festival went on without disruption. He watched Eri-chan smile, truly smile, at the performance. And in that moment, a desperate resolution began to form within him. He would find a way. He would break free. He would use this monstrous power for good, even if it destroyed him in the process. This quiet determination became his new secret, one he carefully hid even from All for One. He would continue to play the part, to learn, to analyze, but he would also search for an escape. A way to cleanse himself, or at least, to redirect the terrible power he wielded. The work studies with Endeavor, the new #1 hero, and his son, Shoto Todoroki, brought Izuku even deeper into the hero world's inner workings. All for One was ecstatic, seeing it as an unparalleled opportunity. Endeavor, the flame hero, All for One mused in Izuku's mind. A man consumed by ambition, driven by a twisted desire to surpass all might. He is a formidable opponent, but also a predictable one. Observe his techniques, his movements, his reliance on brute force. Identify his weak points, the areas where his arrogance might leave him vulnerable. Izuku found himself training alongside Todoroki and Bakugo, a strange trio united by their desire to improve. He watched Endeavor, a living embodiment of relentless power, pushing himself and his sons to their limits. He learned from Endeavor, absorbing lessons on combat efficiency, on controlling destructive power, on maintaining a constant offensive. He continued to use his impact recoil and minor super strength, adapting them to counter Endeavor's overwhelming flames and Todoroki's ice. He pushed himself physically, not just to maintain his cover, but to truly grow stronger, to control the immense power within him, even if he couldn't openly use All for One. He also observed Endeavor's strained relationship with Shoto, the bitter legacy of a forced marriage and a cruel upbringing. He saw Shoto's pain, his internal conflict, and it resonated deeply with Izuku's own struggles. During a patrol, they encountered a high-end Nomu, a terrifyingly powerful bioengineered creature, similar to the one that fought All Might at USJ. This one was faster, smarter, and even more destructive. The battle was desperate. Endeavor pushed himself to the brink, his flames roaring, but even he struggled against the Nomu's regenerative abilities and brutal strength. Bakugo and Todoroki fought valiantly, their combined efforts slowing the monster, but not stopping it. Izuku watched, his heart pounding. All for One's instructions were clear: observe. Do not intervene unless absolutely necessary for your cover. Let them expose their weaknesses. But as he saw Endeavor falter, his flames dimming, saw Todoroki and Bakugo struggle, he couldn't stand by. He thought of Gran Torino's lessons on precision. He thought of his mother. He thought of Irie's smile. He made a decision. A dangerous one. He activated not just his impact recoil and minor super strength, but also, with a deep, hidden tremor, a rarely used, highly specialized quirk from All for One's vast arsenal, kinetic vision. It allowed him to perceive the flow of kinetic energy, to see the pathways of force, the vectors of impact. He had only accessed it a handful of times, its mental demands immense. With kinetic vision, the battle unfolded in slow motion before his eyes. He saw the Nomu's movements, the precise points where its energy flowed, where its regeneration was strongest. He saw Endeavor's and Todoroki's attacks, their strengths and limitations. Endeavor hit its left shoulder, Izuku yelled, his voice cutting through the roar of battle. The regeneration is weakest there. Endeavor, surprised, reacted on instinct, unleashing a prominence burn at the specified spot. The Nomu roared in pain, its regeneration visibly faltering in that area. Bakugo, noticing Izuku's quick thinking, took advantage. Shitty Deku's right. Aim for the weakness. Izuku moved, a blur of speed. He used impact recoil to absorb a stray blow from the Nomu, then with a powerful surge of minor super strength, he slammed into its side, not to damage it, but to propel it into the path of Endeavor's next attack. Dangerous, Izuku. All for One's voice was a sharp reprimand. You are revealing too much. But Izuku ignored him. He was operating on instinct, on the raw, desperate desire to help. He saw a civilian building about to collapse due to the collateral damage. He accessed a subtle application of matter hardening, a quirk he rarely used, and applied it to the building's weakest structural point, strengthening it just enough to prevent its immediate collapse. It was an invisible act of heroism, one that no one would ever notice. Endeavor, with Izuku's strategic guidance and the combined efforts of Bakugo and Todoroki, finally managed to overpower the high-end Nomu, unleashing a devastating jet burn that incinerated it. The battle was won. Endeavor, battered and exhausted, but victorious, was hailed as the true #1 hero. Izuku, however, felt a profound sense of exhaustion, not just physical, but mental and emotional. He had once again walked the razor's edge, using All for One's power and his own twisted training to aid the heroes. He had seen the true cost of heroism, the sacrifices, the pain. And he had felt the sickening thrill of utilizing immense power, even for good. All for One's voice, after the battle, was calm, almost reflective. You have learned much, Izuku. You adapted. You analyzed. You even demonstrated a capacity for subtle, unseen manipulation of the battlefield. This is the true power of All for One. Not just overt destruction, but quiet, efficient control. Your intervention, while perhaps too bold, was ultimately beneficial. You have ingrained yourself further into their trust. You have become indispensable. Izuku felt a wave of despair. He was indispensable to the heroes, yes. But he was also indispensable to All for One. He was trapped, a vital piece in a game of chess where he served two opposing kings. The path to redemption, to truly becoming a hero, seemed more distant than ever, shrouded by the ever-present shadows of All for One's influence. His internal monologues grew darker, more introspective. He questioned everything. Was he truly helping, or merely delaying the inevitable? Was his good outweighed by the inherent evil of his power? Could he ever truly be free? The silence of his room at UA became a cacophony of conflicting thoughts, of the voices of heroes and villains warring within his very soul. The raid on the Shihaseikai, the Yakuza group led by Overhaul, was another event that ripped through Izuku's carefully constructed facade. All for One had been monitoring the situation closely, seeing Overhaul as a potential threat to his own resurgence, and his quirk, Overhaul, as a highly valuable acquisition. Overhaul's quirk is unique, Izuku, All for One explained, his voice chillingly analytical. The ability to dismantle and reassemble matter. A truly powerful ability, with implications for healing, destruction, and even quirk manipulation. Observe it closely. Understand its limits. And if the opportunity arises, ensure it falls into our hands, not the heroes. Izuku found himself on the joint hero raid, alongside Mirio Tagata, the optimistic and incredibly powerful student from UA's Big Three, and a host of pro-heroes. He was still playing the role, using his impact recoil and minor super strength, carefully maintaining his cover. He witnessed Mirio's incredible dedication, his selflessness in protecting Eri. He saw the sheer brutality of Overhaul's quirk, its horrific application in dismantling human beings. Izuku's stomach churned. This was the kind of power All for One spoke of, stripped of all morality. When Mirio lost his quirk, sacrificing himself to protect Eri, Izuku felt a raw, primal surge of anger and despair. He wanted to help, to intervene, to unleash his true power and simply end Overhaul. But All for One's voice was a firm, unyielding presence. Patience, Izuku. This is not your battle to win yet. Observe the hero's struggle. Let them expend their resources. And when Overhaul is weakened, that is when you act. He fought alongside the other heroes, using his controlled quirks, trying to do his best within the confines of his persona. But his mind was racing, analyzing every movement, every quirk, every weakness. Then, All Might arrived. His presence, even in his weakened state, was a beacon of hope. But to Izuku, it was also a painful reminder of his own hypocrisy. He was fighting alongside his idol, yet harboring the power of his greatest enemy. When Eri's quirk, Rewind, finally manifested, uncontrollably, and she unintentionally sent Izuku's impact recoil into overdrive, allowing him to endlessly amplify his strength, it was a terrifying experience. He felt All for One's power surge, amplified beyond anything he had ever imagined. He was moving faster than thought, striking with devastating force, his fabricated quirks blending seamlessly with the overwhelming energy provided by Eri's unstable power. He fought Overhaul, his attacks a blur of pure, raw force. He was invincible, unstoppable. And for a terrifying moment, he reveled in the power, in the feeling of being truly, overwhelmingly strong. He could destroy anything. He could save everyone. This is it, Izuku. All for One's voice was a triumphant roar in his mind. Embrace it. This is your destiny. Crush him. Take his quirk. Make it yours. Izuku heard the command, the insidious whisper of ultimate power. He saw Overhaul, weakened, desperate, his terrifying quirk still active. He could end him. He could take his power. He could fulfill All for One's command. But then, he looked at Eri. Her small, trembling form, clinging to his back, her quirk uncontrollably flowing, causing him to vibrate with power. He saw her innocent, frightened eyes. He thought of her past, of the suffering she had endured at Overhaul's hands. And he thought of Mirio's sacrifice, his unwavering dedication to saving her. His original dream, the pure, uncorrupted desire to save people, ignited within him, burning brighter than any dark command. He had the power now. The power to save, truly save, without the strings of All for One. At least, for this moment. He unleashed a series of devastating blows, not to kill, but to disable, to overwhelm. He aimed to dismantle Overhaul's defenses, to render him helpless. He used the amplified impact recoil to absorb Overhaul's attacks, then unleashed a torrent of minor super-strength punches, each one carrying the force of a small explosion. He didn't take Overhaul's quirk. He didn't fulfill All for One's command. He defeated him. And he protected Eri. When the dust settled, Overhaul was unconscious, his body mangled, his quirk still active but barely. Izuku, his body shaking from the exertion and the immense, unstable power flowing through him, carefully brought Eri to safety. All for One's silence was deafening. He was furious. Izuku had defied him. He had chosen heroism over his assigned mission. Later, when the villains attacked the convoy carrying Overhaul, and Shigaraki used his decay to sever Overhaul's arms, stealing his quirk erasing bullets, Izuku felt a cold dread. All for One's influence was everywhere. His plan was unfolding, even without Izuku's direct intervention. The world was being reshaped, and Izuku was a pawn, whether he liked it or not. He felt the heavy weight of his failure to act, his inability to stop Shigaraki. The power within him was immense, but the chains of his inheritance held him back. He was still Izuku, the boy who wanted to save everyone. But he was also becoming All for One's successor, whether he desired it or not, and the very power he used to save was a constant reminder of the darkness that now lived within him. The internal war raged on, fiercer than ever. The stakes were rising, and Izuku knew, with a chilling certainty, that his choices would soon decide the fate of a world caught between two ultimate powers. The world was preparing for war. And Izuku Midoriya, the quirkless boy who inherited the ultimate evil, was at its very heart. The final months leading up to the Great War were a crucible for Izuku. All for One's patience had worn thin after Izuku's defiance during the Overhaul raid. The subtle manipulations, the insidious whispers, were replaced by more direct commands, more forceful assertions of control. "You still cling to this naive idealism, Izuku," All for One's voice would resonate, cold and precise, bypassing Izuku's thoughts and planting themselves directly into his consciousness. "You mistake sentimentality for strength. It is a weakness. And in the coming war, weakness will be purged." He forced Izuku to spend more time in the hidden training facility, drilling him on multi-quirk combinations. No longer was it just about mastering impact recoil or minor super strength. Now, it was about layering abilities, creating devastating synergies, and understanding the sheer destructive potential of All for One. Izuku learned to combine air cannon with kinetic booster for amplified shockwaves. He practiced using force field quirks for defense, then immediately countering with vibration or disintegration for offense. He learned to sense the quirks of others with quirk affinity sense, a powerful information gathering quirk, and then, with horrifying precision, to identify their weaknesses. He also learned, with a chilling efficiency, how to subtly drain small amounts of energy from ambient quirks without taking the entire quirk, leaving the original wielder fatigued but unaware of the true cause. All for One justified this as a way to replenish his reserves, a necessary practice for maintaining the immense power he now housed. Izuku hated it, but found himself doing it automatically, a subconscious response to the constant drain of All for One's presence. Every interaction, Izuku, is an opportunity, All for One instructed. When you shake a hand, when you pass by someone in the hall, extend a tendril. Just a small taste. It keeps your power flowing, keeps your senses sharp. They will not notice. They are too blind, too weak. Izuku felt like a vampire, subtly preying on the life force of others. His hands, once eager to help, now felt like tools of quiet consumption. He avoided physical contact with his classmates, creating a subtle distance, a fear that they would somehow sense the darkness emanating from him. His internal monologues became a desperate plea for redemption. He would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling of his dorm room, haunted by the faces of those whose quirks he had sampled, however minutely. He would recall the agonizing screams of the man whose quirk All for One had harvested, a stark reminder of the ultimate price of this power. He saw his classmates laughing, training, growing stronger together, united by a common dream. And he felt utterly alone, isolated by the monstrous secret he carried. During class, while Izuku lectured on hero ethics, All for One would whisper his cynical counterarguments. While All Might delivered motivational speeches, All for One would dissect his weaknesses, his dwindling flame. Izuku was constantly being pulled in two directions, his mind a battlefield for opposing ideologies. He tried to confide in no one. He knew no one would understand. How could they? How could he explain that the power he wielded, the power they admired, was the very antithesis of everything they stood for? His relationship with Bakugo remained tense, a volatile mix of rivalry and grudging respect. Bakugo still called him Deku, but now there was a flicker of something new in his eyes, a confused frustration at Izuku's unexpected power. He sensed Izuku was holding back, knew there was more to him, and it infuriated him. "What are you hiding, Deku?" Bakugo would snarl after a sparring session where Izuku had deftly used impact recoil to negate Bakugo's strongest blast. "You're not fighting with everything you've got. Why? Are you looking down on me, you bastard?" Izuku could only offer evasive answers, maintaining his timid facade. I'm still learning, Kachan. My quirk is complicated." All for One was pleased with Izuku's ability to deflect, to maintain the illusion. He suspects, but he does not know. His anger blinds him to the true depth of your capabilities. A useful adversary. He pushes you, sharpens your skills. The situation with the League of Villains was escalating rapidly. They were recruiting, gaining strength, preparing for their master's return. Izuku received encrypted messages, chilling reports from All for One's inner circle, detailing the League's movements, their targets, their growing power. He was a silent witness to the gathering storm. He knew what was coming. The final battle. The war between heroes and villains. And he was caught in the middle. One evening, unable to bear the weight of his secret any longer, Izuku sought out All Might. He found him in his skeletal form, sitting alone in the staff lounge, sipping tea. "All Might," Izuku began, his voice hoarse, Can I ask you something?" All Might looked up, a tired smile on his face. "Of course, young Midoriya. What troubles you?" Izuku hesitated, the words catching in his throat. How could he possibly explain? How could he confess the truth? That he was not the beacon of hope All Might saw, but a vessel for darkness?
I was wondering," Izuku stammered, twisting his fingers nervously, What
does it truly mean to be a hero? When does the line between necessary action and becoming like the villains? When does that line blur?" All Might set down his teacup, his gaze becoming serious. "A profound question, young Midoriya. The path of a hero is not always clear. There are times when difficult choices must be made. Sacrifices. But the fundamental difference, the unyielding line, is this: a hero acts to protect, to save, to uplift. A villain acts to destroy, to dominate, to subjugate. A hero never takes away another's freedom or hope for their own gain. Never." Izuku listened, his heart aching. Never takes away another's freedom or hope for their own gain. The words resonated, striking deep at his core. He had taken All for One. He had accepted a power that stripped others of their essence. He was already on the wrong side of that line. "Sometimes," All Might continued, his voice soft, "power can corrupt. It can tempt one to believe they know best, to impose their will. But true heroism is about serving others, not ruling them. It is about offering a hand, not a fist. Even if that fist is used to save, if the heart behind it is filled with selfish desire, then it is not true heroism." Izuku felt a cold dread settle over him. All Might, unknowingly, was describing his own dilemma. He was a hero in public, but in his heart, he wielded a selfish, destructive power. "Thank you, All Might," Izuku whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He stood up, turning to leave, the weight of his secret heavier than ever. "Young Midoriya, All Might called out, stopping him. You possess a truly remarkable quirk, and a heroic spirit. Do not let doubt consume you. As long as your heart is true, as long as you strive to help others, you will always be a hero. Izuku nodded, forcing a weak smile. He left the room, his mind a turmoil. All Might's words were meant to reassure, but they only served to deepen his despair. His heart wasn't true. He was living a lie. And the war was coming. He knew, with a horrifying certainty, that in the coming conflict, he would be forced to make a choice that would define him forever. The war between heroes and villains was not just outside, it was raging within Izuku Midoriya. And he was rapidly running out of time. He needed to find a way to break free, to cleanse himself, to somehow use All for One for good, before it consumed him entirely and turned him into the very monster he feared. His path was leading him to the precipice, and the fall would be long and devastating. The stage was set. The pieces were moving. And the symbol of peace had no idea the greatest threat to his legacy was already within the gates of UA, cloaked in a hero's uniform, waiting for the signal to strike. The war was coming, and Izuku Midoriya was a ticking time bomb. His final thought before the chapter concludes, a silent scream in the void of his tortured mind: what will I become? Chapter 2, The Rise of a Villain Hero. The shadows deepened, not just around UA, but within Izuku Midoriya. The uneasy truce he'd forged with All for One, the desperate attempt to use the villain's power for heroic ends, was unraveling. The war was no longer a distant threat, it was a palpable presence, its icy fingers tightening around his every action, his every thought. All for One's voice, once a sinister whisper, now carried the undeniable weight of an impending storm. The time for subtlety is drawing to a close, Izuku. The heroes are complacent, lulled by their perceived victory over Overhaul. But the League of Villains grows stronger, unified under Shigaraki. And when the time is right, we will strike. Izuku felt the internal pressure mount. He was a marionette, his strings held taut by two opposing puppeteers. His days at UA became a painful charade. He smiled, he studied, he trained, but every interaction was tinged with the bitterness of deception. He saw the genuine aspirations of his classmates, their fierce loyalty, their unwavering belief in justice, and the stark contrast with his own corrupted reality was a constant, gnawing pain. Bakugo remained a volatile constant, his suspicion of Izuku's hidden strength growing with each passing week. Their rivalry, once a source of humiliation for Izuku, was now a dangerous dance. Bakugo's explosions crackled with an intensity born of frustration, of a primal instinct that sensed something fundamentally wrong with Izuku. You're still holding back, Deku. Bakugo would roar during combat training, his palms smoking. I can feel it. What the hell is that weird power of yours? Stop treating me like some damn extra. Izuku would deflect, feign exhaustion, or simply use his impact recoil to absorb Bakugo's blasts with an unsettling efficiency that only served to fuel Bakugo's anger. All for One enjoyed these confrontations. He pushes you, Izuku. Forces you to adapt. To perfect your control. A valuable sparring partner, even if he is unaware. The League of Villains movements became more aggressive, more public. Minor attacks, strategic kidnappings, targeted acts of sabotage that aimed to erode public trust in heroes. Each incident chipped away at the fragile peace, confirming All for One's cynical predictions. Izuku received detailed reports through a secure, hidden channel that All for One had established. He learned of their recruitment efforts, their acquisition of new resources, their deep infiltration into various societal sectors. He was privy to every chilling detail of their grand design, a blueprint for societal collapse. He knew their targets, their methods, their timelines. The knowledge was a crushing burden. He desperately searched for a way out, for a loophole, for a way to use this knowledge to truly help. He would spend hours in the UA library, poring over ancient quirk research, obscure medical texts, anything that might offer a clue to severing the parasitic bond with All for One, or at least neutralizing his influence. But there was nothing. All for One was too deeply ingrained, too intrinsically linked to his very being. His only hope, he realized with a chilling certainty, was to play the long game. To infiltrate so deeply, to become so indispensable, that he could eventually turn the tide from within. It was a perilous gamble, one that risked his very soul. One night, a cryptic message arrived through his hidden channel. Phase 1 initiated. Target, specific asset within Tartarus. Preparation for extraction. Tartarus. The high-security prison, designed to hold the most dangerous villains. And All for One was its most notorious inmate. The message could only mean one thing: All for One was planning his escape. The war was truly beginning. Izuku felt a wave of nausea, followed by a surge of frantic energy. He had to warn All Might. He had to warn the heroes. But how? How could he reveal such information without exposing his own terrifying secret? How could he explain how he knew? He would immediately become the prime suspect, a traitor, a villain. He was trapped. He spent the next few days in a torment of indecision. He watched All Might in the hallways, saw the tired lines around his eyes, the subtle tremor in his hand. He knew the symbol of peace was weakening, his fight against All for One taking its toll. To expose the truth now might shatter the fragile hope All Might represented, cause mass panic, and likely result in Izuku's own imprisonment or worse. All for One's voice was a mocking whisper. You see, Izuku? The cost of revealing truth can be far greater than the cost of deception. What good is a warning if it destroys the very foundation you seek to protect? Izuku decided to take a calculated risk. He couldn't directly warn All Might. But he could subtly manipulate the situation. He began to drop hints, seemingly casual observations in class discussions, analytical insights into villain behavior that were just a little too accurate. He would emphasize the League's growing strategic capabilities, their long-term planning, their focus on psychological warfare. He hoped, desperately, that Aizawa, or even All Might, would pick up on his subtle warnings. His strategy worked, to a degree. Aizawa, ever perceptive, noticed Izuku's unusual insights. He pulled Izuku aside after class one day. Midoriya, Aizawa's voice was low, his eyes narrowed. Your analysis of the League of Villains is surprisingly astute. Almost as if you have inside information. Izuku's heart leapt into his throat. He forced himself to remain calm, to maintain his persona. Well, Aizawa-sensei, I've just been doing a lot of research, you know. Obsessive analysis of villain patterns, their psychological profiles. It's a hobby. He gave a nervous, self-deprecating laugh. Aizawa studied him for a long moment, his gaze unnervingly piercing. Be careful, Midoriya. The path of a hero is dangerous. Too much knowledge can sometimes be a burden. Or worse, a temptation. He then walked away, leaving Izuku trembling. He had avoided exposure, but at what cost? He had planted seeds of doubt, but had they truly been understood? The prison break from Tartarus happened swiftly, brutally. News reports flashed across every screen, detailing the devastating attack, the overwhelming force, the sheer audacity of the League of Villains. And then, the chilling confirmation: All for One had escaped. A cold, triumphant surge of power erupted within Izuku, almost overwhelming him. All for One's joy, his resurgence, his unchained fury, flooded Izuku's senses. The game has changed, Izuku. All for One's voice was a booming crescendo in his mind. The pieces are now in play. Prepare yourself. The war begins. Izuku felt a profound sense of despair. His subtle warnings had been too subtle. His desperate gamble had failed. All for One was free. And now, the inevitable confrontation, the ultimate battle, was upon them. He was on the wrong side. He was a part of it. The world plunged into chaos. All for One's escape from Tartarus was the spark that ignited the powder keg. The League of Villains, now bolstered by their master's presence and a surge of new recruits, launched a coordinated series of attacks across the country. Cities burned, heroes fell, and public trust plummeted. UA High School, as the symbol of hero society, became a fortress, its students and staff mobilized for defense. Izuku found himself on the front lines, not as a spy, but as a combatant. He was forced to unleash more of All for One's derived quirks, meticulously curated by his master for combat effectiveness, yet still within the bounds of his fabricated persona. He fought alongside his classmates, a bewildering mix of desperate camaraderie and internal betrayal. He used impact recoil to absorb devastating blows from powerful villains, then countered with bursts of minor super strength that sent them flying. He employed air cannon for crowd control, scattering masses of lesser villains, protecting civilians and fellow heroes. He even, on occasion, subtly used kinetic vision to anticipate enemy movements, shouting warnings to his allies that seemed born of impossible foresight. "Midoriya, your instincts are incredible," Kirishima yelled, hardening his body to block a villain's attack. "Damn it, Deku, you're getting stronger, but you're still unpredictable," Bakugo barked, blasting a villain away, a frustrated admiration in his voice. Izuku accepted the praise, the critiques, the camaraderie, all while a cold dread settled in his stomach. Every display of strength, every act of apparent heroism, further solidified his cover, made him more valuable to All for One. All for One's voice was a constant presence in his mind, guiding him, correcting him, praising his efficiency. "Excellent, Izuku. You adapt quickly. Observe their weaknesses. The Hero Society's reliance on singular, powerful quirks is their undoing. They cannot comprehend the versatility of true power." During one particularly intense battle, Izuku found himself facing a villain with a powerful elasticity quirk, capable of stretching and retracting his limbs with incredible force. The villain was fast, unpredictable, and was overwhelming several pro heroes. All for One's voice was sharp. "This quirk. It is a variant of the one you encountered with Gentle Criminal. Remember its limitations. Its greatest strength is also its greatest weakness. And it would make a valuable addition to our arsenal. Take it, Izuku." Subtly. Izuku froze. The command was direct. He was to steal a quirk, here, in the middle of a battle, from a living human being, for All for One's benefit. His stomach lurched. He remembered the man in the vault, his life drained away. He hesitated. The heroes were struggling. They needed him. He couldn't betray them, not openly. But he also couldn't defy All for One without risking severe repercussions. He made a desperate compromise. He engaged the elasticity villain, using his impact recoil to absorb the force of the elastic blows, and his minor super strength to land powerful counterpunches. He pushed the villain back, creating an opening for Endeavor to deliver a devastating flame attack. As Endeavor's flames enveloped the villain, Izuku, with a deep breath, extended a tendril of All for One, not to take the quirk, but to copy a fragment of its energy, enough to give All for One a blueprint, a sample for future replication. It was a terrifying, unauthorized act, a desperate attempt to satisfy his master without outright becoming a monster. He felt a faint pull, a momentary resistance, as the villain's quirk energy registered within All for One's vast reservoir. It wasn't a complete theft, but it was a step closer to the abyss. "Unacceptable, Izuku." All for One's voice was a furious roar in his mind, surprising him with its intensity. "That was not a full acquisition. You allowed your sentimentality to interfere with a prime opportunity. This weakness is intolerable." Izuku reeled, physically stumbling from the mental onslaught. All for One's disappointment was a suffocating weight. He had failed to fully obey, and the consequences would be severe. The immediate aftermath was a harsh reminder of All for One's control. His mental guidance became even more aggressive, more domineering. Izuku found himself struggling to suppress the overwhelming urge to lash out, to obey All for One's every command, even the ones he abhorred. It felt like his mind was no longer his own, a constant battle for sovereignty. The war escalated, reaching a crescendo with the simultaneous battles across multiple fronts. All Might, depleted and desperate, found himself pushed to his absolute limits. Izuku, still at UA, monitoring the news feeds, saw the grim reality unfolding. All Might was fighting All for One again, this time in a ravaged city, their clash tearing the very fabric of reality. The symbol of peace, now skeletal and weakened, was on the verge of defeat. A powerful, conflicting surge of emotions ripped through Izuku. Fear, for the hero he still admired. Guilt, for the role he unknowingly played in All for One's resurgence. And a terrifying, forbidden excitement, as he felt the raw, unbridled power of All for One unleashed through his mentor, echoing faintly within his own being. "He is weakening, Izuku. One more push. One more blow. And the symbol of peace will fall. And then, the new age will begin. All for One's voice was a chilling triumph. Izuku clenched his fists, his body trembling. He couldn't stand by. He couldn't let All Might die. Not like this. He had to act. But how? He was miles away, trapped behind the defenses of UA. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the UA fortress. The League of Villains had launched a direct assault, a diversion to keep the other heroes occupied while All Might fought All for One. Shigaraki, now more confident, more powerful, led the charge, flanked by powerful Nomu. Izuku found himself confronting a high-end Nomu, one even more formidable than the one he'd faced with Endeavor. Its power was immense, its attacks relentless. He fought with every ounce of strength he possessed, unleashing a torrent of his fabricated quirks, impact recoil absorbing blows, minor super strength delivering powerful strikes, air cannon deflecting and disorienting. He was pushed to his absolute limits, his body screaming in protest. He could feel All for One's impatience, his anger at Izuku's continued adherence to his fabricated identity. Unleash it, Izuku. All for One commanded, his voice a furious roar in his mind. The full power. And this. And then, join me. Your destiny awaits. Izuku gritted his teeth, sweat stinging his eyes. He saw his classmates, fighting valiantly, their faces grim but determined. He saw the genuine fear in the eyes of the civilians they were protecting. He could not betray them now. He focused his immense will, pushing back against All for One's dominating presence. He would not give in. Not yet. He decided on another desperate gamble. He would use All for One's power, yes, but for his own ends. He would use it to get to All Might. To make a final, desperate stand. He channeled all of the kinetic booster he possessed, pushing his speed to an impossible degree. He used impact recoil to launch himself, ignoring the pain, bursting through the lines of villains, through the defenses of UA, a blur of green, leaving his astonished classmates and the raging Nomu behind. Midoriya. Where are you going? He heard Bakugo's furious shout, quickly fading behind him. He was a runaway train, driven by a desperate, suicidal hope. All for One's voice was a confused, then enraged, crescendo in his mind. What are you doing, Izuku? Stop. You are abandoning your post. You are defying my command. Izuku ignored him. He pushed his speed further, activating a rarely used mobility quirk from All for One's collection, Light Step, that allowed him to move with an almost ethereal agility, skimming across surfaces, bounding over obstacles. He was heading straight for the heart of the battle, towards All Might and All for One. He burst into the ravaged city, the air thick with smoke and the tang of destruction. Buildings were reduced to rubble, streets ripped apart. And in the center of the devastation, two colossal figures clashed, All Might, barely clinging to his muscular form, and All for One, a terrifying silhouette of pure power. All Might was on his knees, blood dripping from his mouth, his arm twisted at an unnatural angle. All for One stood over him, his hand poised, ready to deliver the final, crushing blow. This is it, symbol of peace, All for One's voice boomed across the ruined city, amplified by a quirk, chilling in its finality. Your reign ends here. The age of heroes is over. Izuku screamed. A raw, desperate sound that tore from his throat. All Might. No. He launched himself forward, a final, desperate surge of power. He activated every offensive quirk he dared, every bit of kinetic booster. Minor super strength. Air cannon, and even a surge of uncontrolled energy discharge radiating from his body. He was a human missile, powered by a desperate hope and a terrifying borrowed strength. All for One paused, his masked head turning. Izuku? What is the meaning of this insolence? His voice was cold, lethal. Izuku didn't answer. He slammed into All for One, not with a precise, calculated strike, but with a desperate, all-consuming explosion of power. It was a suicide charge, a reckless, suicidal defiance. The impact was devastating. The sheer, uncontained force of All for One's power, unleashed through Izuku with such raw, emotional intensity, sent a shockwave through the ruined city. All for One staggered back, surprised, his mask cracking, his arm flaring with unexpected pain. You defy me? All for One roared, his voice laced with unbridled fury. You use my power. Against me? Izuku stood panting, his body screaming in pain, his arm throbbing from the uncontrolled discharge. He looked at All for One, then at All Might, who was staring at him, bewildered, battered, but still alive. I won't let you win, Izuku choked out, his voice raw, defiant. I won't let you destroy everything. I won't let you hurt him. All for One let out a chilling, enraged laugh. Foolish boy. You think you can control what I have given you? You think you can defy your destiny? This power. It is mine. And you are merely its vessel. He lunged, his own hand glowing with malevolent energy, aimed directly at Izuku. This was it. All for One was going to take his power back. He was going to kill him. But then, All Might moved. Despite his injuries, despite his weakening body, he roared, summoning a final, desperate surge of One for All. Detroit. Smash. The blow was aimed not at All for One, but at Izuku, a calculated, controlled strike designed to push him out of the line of fire. All Might understood. He didn't know how, but he understood Izuku was in danger. Izuku was sent flying, tumbling through the air, away from All for One's deadly grasp. He landed hard, crashing into a pile of rubble, his vision blurring. He looked up. All Might, battered, broken, stood alone against All for One, his body flickering, his time almost up. The symbol of peace was fighting his final battle. This is your chance, Izuku. All for One's voice, though distant, was a chilling command. Return to me. We will finish him. Together. Izuku could feel the power, the immense, terrifying power, thrumming within him, urging him to obey, to join his master, to finally end All Might. It was the ultimate temptation. The chance to wield true, unchallengeable strength, to be truly free of doubt and weakness. But then, he saw All Might. Not the invincible symbol of peace, but a dying man, standing defiant, protecting a world that believed in him. He saw the flicker of hope in All Might's eyes, the unwavering spirit that had once inspired Izuku himself. And he saw Irie's smile. Uraka's kindness. Todoroki's struggle. Bakugo's frustrated ambition. He saw the faces of his classmates, the future heroes, trusting him, relying on him. He couldn't be that monster. He couldn't betray them, not now, not when it mattered most. He fought back against All for One's influence, with every fiber of his being. He ripped at the tendrils of darkness, the insidious whispers, the overwhelming commands. It was an excruciating mental battle, far more agonizing than any physical blow. No. Izuku screamed, his voice raw with defiance. I won't be your puppet. All for One snarled, his attention divided between All Might and his defiant apprentice. Then you are useless to me. I will take what is mine. As All Might unleashed his final, devastating United States of Smash, a blow that finally broke All for One, stripping him of his power, Izuku felt a sudden, agonizing jolt. A tearing sensation within him, as if a part of his very soul was being ripped away. All for One, in his dying moments, or perhaps in a last act of spite, was attempting to reclaim the power he had bestowed upon Izuku. Izuku screamed, falling to his knees, clutching his head. He felt the vast reservoir of quirks within him destabilize, 1,000 voices crying out, a chaotic maelstrom of energy threatening to tear him apart. He saw flashes of the quirks, the faces of their original owners, their despair, their anger. It was a terrifying, overwhelming sensation. But then, a familiar, comforting warmth. One for all. Not the true one for all, but a faint, residual echo of its power, left behind in the chaotic transfer, something All for One had missed, something that resonated with Izuku's inherent desire to save. It was weak, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a flickering candle in the encroaching darkness. He focused on that warmth, on that tiny spark of light. He channeled his sheer will, not to retain All for One, but to contain it. To force it back, to seal it within himself, to prevent it from escaping, from being reclaimed by its true master. It was an act of desperate, suicidal defiance, an attempt to become a living prison for the ultimate evil. The tearing sensation intensified, then snapped. A silence, deep and profound, descended upon his mind. The cacophony of quirks was muted, subdued. All for One's voice, once a dominant roar, was now a faint, distant whisper, barely audible, a prisoner within his own mind. He had trapped him. Or at least, a part of him. Izuku lay gasping, his body drenched in sweat, his muscles twitching. He looked up. All Might stood triumphant, battered but victorious, having delivered his final blow. All for One was defeated, unconscious, his power broken. The world cheered. The heroes arrived, exhausted but relieved. All Might, depleted of his power, pointed to the cameras, his iconic finger raised, a final, poignant message of hope. "You're next." Izuku watched him, tears streaming down his face, a mix of relief, despair, and a profound, chilling understanding. All Might thought he was next in line for One for All. He had no idea Izuku had just become the new prison for All for One. He was the next symbol, yes. But a symbol of what? He stood, his body trembling, the immense, dormant power of All for One a terrifying weight within him. He had chosen. He had defied his master. He had saved All Might, and in doing so, had bound himself to a darker, more complex destiny. The path of a villain hero, as All for One had called it, was now his to walk. And the war within his soul had only just begun. The world breathed a collective sigh of relief. All for One was defeated, imprisoned once more. The war, for now, had ended. But for Izuku, the battle had only just begun. He was hailed as a hero, praised for his courage and strength during the UA attack and his mysterious assistance at the final battle. He accepted the accolades, the handshakes, the pats on the back, all while the immense, silent power of All for One hummed beneath his skin, a constant, chilling reminder of his new reality. He was a walking contradiction. A symbol of peace, unknowingly carrying the seeds of destruction. All for One's voice, though muted, was still present in his mind, a constant, low-frequency hum. It was no longer commanding, but insidious, analytical, waiting for its moment. "You merely delayed the inevitable, Izuku. You have contained a fragment, yes, but the essence remains. And with it, my influence. You will see, in time. This world cannot be saved by their naive ideals. It requires true power. And that power is within you." Izuku tried to ignore it, to focus on his life at UA, to truly become the hero he pretended to be. He trained harder, not just to control his fabricated quirks, but to understand the vast, dormant library of abilities within him. He meticulously catalogued them in his mind, categorizing them, analyzing their potential. It was a compulsion, a desperate attempt to gain mastery over the monster he housed. He discovered that while All for One could no longer directly command him, its essence, its sheer presence, subtly influenced his thought processes. He found himself thinking more strategically, more cynically, seeing the world through a colder, more pragmatic lens. He noticed flaws in hero operations, weaknesses in public infrastructure, vulnerabilities in societal systems that he would have never perceived before. The analytical mind that All for One had so valued was now sharper, but also more detached. His relationships with his classmates became even more complex. He deepened his bond with Uraka, her genuine warmth a comfort against the internal chill. He found a strange, grudging respect for Bakugo, whose relentless drive for strength mirrored, in a twisted way, All for One's own pursuit of power. He even sought out Todoroki, feeling a connection to his struggle with an inherited, powerful, and often destructive quirk. He found himself subtly guiding them, using his unseen kinetic vision to point out weak points in training, or a barely audible air current to redirect an attack during sparring, making it seem like a lucky break for his allies. He was a silent protector, a guardian angel shrouded in darkness. His internship with Endeavor continued to be a fascinating, albeit uncomfortable, experience. He saw the number one hero struggling with his new role, with the weight of expectation after All Might's retirement. He saw the cracks in Endeavor's stoic facade, the lingering regret over his past. All for One's voice would often interject during these observations. He is a powerful vessel, Izuku. But his ambition consumes him. His desire to surpass All Might blinds him to his own limitations. And his past. A powerful lever to exploit. Remember this. Vulnerability is a tool. Izuku would push back mentally, trying to maintain his empathy for Endeavor's struggles. He tried to offer subtle advice, to steer Endeavor towards a more balanced approach, even if his motivations were secretly tied to All for One's desire for information and control. The Paranormal Liberation Front War. It was the next catastrophic event, one that Izuku knew was coming, even if he couldn't fully predict its scale. The League of Villains, now fused with the Meta Liberation Army, was a unified, terrifying force, driven by Shigaraki's destructive ambition and guided by All for One's lingering influence. Izuku received vague, unsettling premonitions from the dormant All for One within him. Not direct commands, but a sense of impending doom, a rising tide of malevolent energy. He knew the world was on the brink. He tried, desperately, to warn All Might, Aizawa, and the other top heroes. He presented his analysis, his theories on the villains' movements, their growing numbers, their increasingly coordinated attacks. He spoke of a grand unification, a true war, not just scattered skirmishes. They listened, concerned, but perhaps not fully grasping the true scale of the threat. They deployed heroes, strengthened defenses, but the sheer size and fanaticism of the Paranormal Liberation Front proved overwhelming. When the war finally erupted, it was more devastating than anything Izuku could have imagined. Cities were leveled, lives were lost on an unimaginable scale, and heroes were pushed to their breaking point. Izuku found himself on the front lines, fighting not just for his life, but for the very soul of hero society. He shed his timid persona, unleashing more of All for One's derived quirks, his impact recoil and minor super strength amplified by sheer desperation. He combined them with air cannon for powerful shockwaves, force field for instantaneous defense, and even fleeting bursts of kinetic booster for impossible speed. He was a whirlwind of controlled destruction, protecting, saving, but also inflicting precise, devastating damage on the villains. He fought alongside Bakugo, Todoroki, and the other members of Class 1A, a formidable team, despite their internal conflicts. Bakugo, seeing Izuku fight with a terrifying efficiency, with powers he hadn't witnessed before, roared in frustration and grudging respect. Deku, what the hell is that? Where did you get all that power? Izuku couldn't answer. He could only fight. He saw Shigaraki, now fully awakened, a terrifying embodiment of pure decay. Shigaraki's power was absolute, capable of crumbling entire cities with a touch. Izuku felt All for One's thrill, his approval at Shigaraki's destructive awakening. He is ready, Izuku. The vessel is complete. The true heir to my destructive will. Izuku's heart plummeted. He knew Shigaraki was All for One's other successor, his chosen instrument of destruction. He was the antithesis of everything Izuku still desperately clung to. He found himself confronting Shigaraki, a desperate, futile attempt to stop him. He unleashed a barrage of attacks, combining every offensive quirk he dared, but Shigaraki's decay was absolute, tearing through his defenses, forcing him to adapt at an impossible speed. All for One's voice, a chilling presence, offered a grotesque choice. You cannot defeat him with limited power, Izuku. You must unleash the true All for One. Embrace it. Let me guide you. We can stop him together. Or, you can choose to take his quirk. End his reign. Become the sole successor. The temptation was immense. The power, the promise of control, the chance to finally end Shigaraki's reign of terror. He could do it. He could unleash the full, unbridled power of All for One. But at what cost? Becoming a monster himself? Becoming exactly what All for One intended him to be? He hesitated, his body trembling, battered by Shigaraki's decay. He saw the faces of the heroes, fighting, bleeding, sacrificing everything. He saw All Might, watching from afar, his eyes filled with despair, powerless to stop his greatest enemy's new pawn. Izuku made a choice. Not All for One's choice. Not a hero's choice. His own. He unleashed a powerful, focused burst of energy discharge, amplified by a subtle, uncontrolled surge of All for One's raw power. It wasn't aimed at Shigaraki to kill, but to create a devastating shockwave, a massive concussive force designed to disrupt, to push back, to buy time. The blast was immense, an uncontrolled explosion that ripped through the battlefield, sending heroes and villains alike scattering. Shigaraki, caught off guard, was thrown back, his decay momentarily nullified by the sheer force. Izuku. What have you done? All for One's voice was a furious, echoing roar in his mind, its presence destabilizing. You squandered an opportunity. You defy me again. Izuku ignored the rage. He had bought precious seconds. He then focused on another hidden quirk, molecular adhesion, allowing him to temporarily stick to surfaces. He launched himself, using his kinetic booster, toward Shigaraki, not to fight, but to attempt to incapacitate, to restrain. He needed to buy time for the heroes to regroup, to find a weakness. The battle raged, a blur of destruction and despair. Izuku fought with a ferocity born of desperation, a terrifying blend of his heroic instinct and all for One's raw power. He was a force of nature, protecting, destroying, a living paradox. When the dust settled, the Paranormal Liberation Front was defeated, but at a devastating cost. Countless lives were lost, cities lay in ruins, and hero society was shattered. Shigaraki, the weakened, had escaped, his power growing, his hatred simmering. Izuku, battered, broken, his body screaming in pain, felt a profound sense of emptiness. He had fought. He had saved. But the victory felt hollow. He was still a prisoner of All for One, his soul further tainted by the horrors he had witnessed and the power he had wielded. He found All Might amidst the wreckage, skeletal and leaning heavily on Gran Torino. All Might looked at Izuku, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and a faint, unsettling suspicion. He had seen Izuku's power, its raw intensity, its unnerving versatility. He knew it was beyond what Izuku had publicly displayed. Midoriya, All Might rasped, a tremor in his voice. That power. What was that? Izuku looked away, unable to meet his gaze. It's a new development, All Might. My quirk. It's evolving.
I don't fully understand it yet.
It was a lie, a flimsy one, but All Might, exhausted and heartbroken by the war's devastation, let it pass. You fought bravely, young man. You truly did. You saved many. Izuku felt a wave of crushing guilt. He had saved lives, yes. But he had done so with the power of the enemy. And he had chosen not to expose All for One's true nature, not to reveal his own complicity, not to risk shattering the symbol of peace's faith entirely. He was a hero in public, a villain in secret. And the weight of that deception was becoming unbearable. He knew the war was far from over. This was merely a temporary ceasefire. Shigaraki would return, stronger, more ruthless. And All for One, dormant within him, was waiting, patiently, for its moment to claim him entirely. Izuku was the new battlefield, the final battleground for the future of quirks. And he was utterly, terrifyingly alone. The aftermath of the Paranormal Liberation War left hero society in tatters. The public's trust was severely eroded, heroes were questioned, and the sheer scale of the devastation left an indelible scar. For Izuku, the internal turmoil mirrored the external chaos. All for One's presence, though contained, felt heavier, more demanding. The whispers were no longer just analytical, they were tinged with a growing impatience, a predatory anticipation. They are weak, Izuku. Their spirit is broken. This is the perfect moment. The stage is set for a true reshaping of society. Our society. Izuku found himself isolated. He couldn't share his burden. His classmates, though scarred, still clung to their ideals of heroism. Their innocence, their unwavering belief, felt like a cruel mockery of his own tainted existence. He distanced himself, unable to bear the weight of his deception, the fear that they would somehow sense the darkness within him. He continued his training, pushing his body to its absolute limits, driven by a desperate need for control. He meticulously studied All for One's contained quirks, trying to understand their origins, their potential, their limitations. He was an unwilling archivist of stolen power, his mind a living library of villainy. He sought out information on quirks' singularities, on the limits of human adaptation, on anything that might offer a way to sever the bond or control the overwhelming power without succumbing to its evil. During his increasingly solitary patrols as a provisional hero, Izuku encountered the remnants of the Paranormal Liberation Front, desperate stragglers, petty criminals emboldened by the chaos. He fought them with a chilling efficiency, using his combined fabricated quirks, but also, on rare, desperate occasions, dipping into All for One's deeper reserves. He used force field to deflect a barrage of bullets, not just for himself, but to protect innocent bystanders. He used a precise burst of air cannon to disarm a villain without lethal force, a fleeting display of restraint against the raw power he could unleash. He used kinetic vision to anticipate escape routes, guiding police and other heroes to intercept fleeing criminals. He was a silent, unacknowledged force, a phantom hero operating in the shadows, using villainous power for heroic ends. Each time he used a quirk from All for One's full collection, however, he felt a subtle shift within him, a chilling ripple of satisfaction from the dormant entity. It was like feeding a beast, nourishing the very thing he fought to contain. His internal monologues were a relentless self-interrogation. Am I truly helping, or am I merely extending All for One's influence? Am I delaying the inevitable, or am I becoming the very thing I despise? He found himself drawn to All Might's side more frequently, not just as a student seeking guidance, but as a silent observer, a desperate plea for a solution. He saw the toll the war had taken on All Might, the increasing fragility of his skeletal form. The symbol of peace was a dying ember, his flame flickering, yet still burning with unwavering resolve. All for One's voice would interject, cold and precise. He is a spent force, Izuku. His weakness is pathetic. His time is over. The new era demands a new symbol. A true king. Izuku would clench his jaw, fighting the urge to lash out, to scream, to reject the insidious whispers. One night, All Might pulled him aside, his gaze unusually piercing. "Young Midoriya," he began, his voice serious, "I've been watching you. Your growth, your instincts. It's truly remarkable. But there's something else. A flicker of something I can't quite place. Darkness. It concerns me." Izuku's blood ran cold. Had he been exposed? Had All Might finally seen the truth?
I don't know what you mean, All Might, Izuku stammered, his heart pounding.
All Might sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Perhaps it's just the trauma of the war. We've all seen too much. But promise me this, young man, never lose sight of why you fight. Never let the darkness consume the light within you. Because that light, that's what truly makes a hero." Izuku could only nod, tears welling in his eyes. All Might, even in his weakened state, still saw the light. He still believed in him. The guilt was a heavy weight, almost suffocating him. The heroes organized a grand strategy meeting, a desperate attempt to regroup, to plan their next move against the fragmented but still dangerous villain forces. Izuku was invited as a promising young hero, a symbol of the next generation. He sat among the top heroes, listening to their plans, their strategies, their desperate hopes. And All for One's voice, a chilling counterpoint, would dissect every plan, identify every flaw, every vulnerability. Foolish. Naive. Their tactics are predictable. Their reliance on public approval is their Achilles heel. And their leadership. Fragmented, divided. Izuku found himself speaking up, offering insights, strategic suggestions that were unsettlingly accurate, chillingly precise. He proposed unconventional tactics, highlighted hidden weaknesses in villain organizations that no one else had considered. His contributions were hailed as brilliant, born of an exceptional analytical mind. He was becoming an invaluable asset to the very system he was meant to destroy. He felt the terrifying thrill of power, not just physical, but intellectual. He was manipulating events, subtly steering the heroes, protecting them even as he served a hidden master. It was a dangerous game, one that fed the darkness within him, even as it satisfied a twisted sense of purpose. But the price was his soul. He was losing himself. The old Izuku, the shy, earnest, quirkless boy, was slowly being subsumed by the calculating, cynical, all-powerful successor to All for One. Then, the League of Villains, now fully reborn as the Paranormal Liberation Front, launched its final, decisive strike. Not against the hero's headquarters, but against a seemingly insignificant civilian target, a symbol of peace and normalcy. It was a deliberate act of psychological warfare, designed to break the public spirit entirely. The heroes, caught off guard, mobilized in a desperate attempt to defend the city. Izuku found himself at the epicenter of the new conflict, a maelstrom of chaos and destruction. Shigaraki, more powerful than ever, led the assault, his decay quirk unleashed with terrifying abandon. Izuku engaged Shigaraki, not out of duty, but out of a desperate, final defiance. He knew this was it. The ultimate confrontation. He had to make his choice. He unleashed the full extent of his fabricated quirks, pushing them beyond their limits, his body screaming in protest. He used impact recoil to absorb Shigaraki's decay, minor super strength to deliver devastating blows, air cannon for powerful shockwaves, force field for desperate defense. He was a whirlwind of controlled destruction, his movements a blur of desperate power. But Shigaraki was stronger. His decay spread like a plague, consuming everything in its path. Izuku was pushed back, his defenses crumbling, his body aching. All for One's voice was a booming crescendo in his mind, seizing the opportunity. Now, Izuku. Unleash it. The true power. This is your moment. Take his quirk. Become the undisputed master. Or, join me, and we will crush them all. Together. The temptation was overwhelming. He could feel the power of All for One, vast and terrifying, roaring to be unleashed, to consume Shigaraki, to end the war with a single, decisive act. He could become the ultimate power, the true king of quirks. He could stop the suffering. But then, he saw it. A single tear, running down Eri's face as she watched the destruction from a safe distance. He heard Uraka's determined cry as she lifted heavy rubble to save civilians. He saw the unwavering resolve in All Might's fading eyes. And he remembered All Might's words, "A hero never takes away another's freedom or hope for their own gain." He also remembered the terrifying sight of the man whose quirk All for One had harvested, a husk of his former self. He clenched his teeth. No. He would not become that. He would not become a monster, even to save the world. He focused his immense willpower, not on unleashing All for One, but on resisting it. On containing it. On using its derived powers, but never its true, soul-corrupting essence. He used a concentrated burst of kinetic booster and light step to move with impossible speed, darting around Shigaraki, drawing his attention, creating openings for other heroes. He used vibrational sense to detect cracks in the ground, in buildings, and then, with agonizing precision, used subtle applications of matter hardening to reinforce them, preventing further collapse, saving countless lives, all while remaining unnoticed. He was fighting a war on two fronts, the villains outside, and the demon within. Finally, All Might arrived. His skeletal form, now barely recognizable, still radiated an aura of defiant hope. He faced Shigaraki, ready for his final, desperate stand. Shigaraki, All Might rasped, his voice barely a whisper, yet it carried across the battlefield. This ends now. As All Might and Shigaraki clashed in a final, devastating confrontation, Izuku found himself standing between them, a desperate, silent guardian. He didn't fight Shigaraki directly. Instead, he used his precise, subtle control of All for One's derived quirks to manipulate the battlefield, to save civilians, to aid heroes, to create openings. He used air cannon to deflect debris from falling on civilians. He used impact recoil to absorb stray blasts that threatened to hit injured heroes. He used kinetic vision to anticipate Shigaraki's movements, shouting warnings to All Might that seemed like impossible guesswork. Foolish, Izuku. All for One roared within him, his presence growing unstable from the sheer defiance. You are wasting your potential. Let me guide you. We could end him now. But Izuku refused. He continued his dance of desperate defense and subtle manipulation. He was a ghost in the war, a silent force, using the very power of darkness to protect the light. Then, the final blow. All Might, with a last, desperate surge of One for All, connected with Shigaraki, a devastating blow that shattered the villain, leaving him broken and defeated. The war was over. Shigaraki was defeated. But All Might was at his absolute end, his power completely extinguished. He stood, a frail, trembling old man, his iconic form gone forever. Izuku watched, tears streaming down his face. He had saved All Might, yes. He had helped the heroes win. But at what cost? He was still alive. But All for One was still within him, a terrifying, silent presence, waiting for its chance. He was the new symbol, unknowingly. The symbol of a twisted, agonizing choice. He was Izuku Midoriya, the hero. But he was also the container for the ultimate villain. And the world, unknowingly, was now relying on a boy who wrestled with a demon in his soul. The Rise of a Villain Hero. Chapter 3, Shadows over UA. The world was a raw, gaping wound. Scars of the paranormal liberation war marred every cityscape, a grim testament to the fragility of peace and the terrifying power of destruction. Public trust, once the bedrock of hero society, had eroded into a fine, distrustful dust. Heroes, once infallible symbols, were now scrutinized, questioned, and often, resented. The sheer scale of the devastation, the countless lives lost, the cities reduced to rubble, etched an indelible scar on the collective psyche. For Izuku Midoriya, the external chaos was a mere reflection of the cataclysm raging within his own soul, a storm of guilt, fear, and a terrifying, burgeoning power. All for One's presence, though subdued and contained by Izuku's sheer force of will, felt heavier, more demanding. Its whispers, no longer just analytical observations of a master to an apprentice, but tinged with a chilling impatience, a predatory anticipation of inevitable triumph. They are weak, Izuku. Their spirit is broken. Their grand ideals are exposed as flimsy rhetoric. This is the perfect moment. The stage is set for a true reshaping of society. My society. Our society. They crave order, and we shall provide it, by force if necessary. The voice resonated deep within his consciousness, not as a command he could actively defy, but as an undeniable, self-evident truth, slowly but surely eroding the very foundations of his own morality, twisting his perceptions with insidious logic. Izuku found himself isolated, a king of secrets on a lonely throne. How could he share his burden, this monstrous truth that gnawed at his insides? How could he explain that the very power that had saved lives, the power they now lauded, was the same power that had stripped them away from countless others? His classmates, though hardened by the war's brutal realities, still clung fiercely to their ideals of heroism, their belief in a brighter, more just future. Their innocence, their unwavering faith in the straightforward path of light and good, felt like a cruel mockery of his own tainted existence. He distanced himself, creating subtle barriers, unable to bear the suffocating weight of his deception, the gnawing fear that they would somehow sense the primordial darkness that thrummed beneath his skin, a discordant hum against their vibrant quirks. He sat in the UA common room one evening, hunched over a textbook, feigning intense interest in a pro-hero documentary flickering on the wall-mounted screen, while his internal world churned with self-loathing and a terrifying strategical calculus. Uraka, ever perceptive, ever kind, noticed his quiet brooding. She approached him cautiously, her usual bubbly demeanor softened by a palpable concern. "Deku-kun, you've been so quiet lately," she said, her voice soft, a gentle inquiry. She settled into the chair beside him, her presence a warm, comforting anchor. "Are you okay? The war. It was a lot for all of us. You took so much on your shoulders." Izuku forced a smile, a practiced artifice that felt like sandpaper on his soul. "Yeah, Uraka-san. Just thinking. It was a lot. The weight of it, you know? Seeing all that destruction. It changes things." He looked away, focusing intently on the flickering screen, unable to meet her empathetic, searching gaze. "She sees too much. Her kindness is a vulnerability I can't afford. It chips away at my resolve." All for One's voice was a low hum, a predatory purr. Such a pure heart. Easily swayed. Easily broken. A prime target for manipulation, if ever there was one. "I get it," she murmured, her hand reaching out, laying a gentle, comforting touch on his arm. Izuku flinched, almost imperceptibly, a raw nerve exposed. The familiar, abhorrent tendril of all for one instinctively reached out, a subconscious reaction, tasting, sampling her quirk energy, a fleeting, forbidden pleasure. He violently suppressed it, the mental effort causing a brief, sharp headache that lanced behind his eyes. "Sorry, I'm just a little on edge still," he muttered, pulling his arm away as casually as he could, inventing a reason for his reaction. Sudden movements. After all that chaos. Uraka withdrew her hand, her brow furrowed slightly, but her warmth remained unwavering. "It's okay, Deku-kun. Really. We're all here for you. You don't have to carry everything alone. We're classmates. We're friends." Her words, meant to comfort, to offer solace, only intensified his guilt, a sharp, twisting pain in his gut. Friends. How can I be friends with them when I am this? Training became an all-consuming obsession, a desperate, physical manifestation of his need for control, a way to channel the raging storm within. He spent countless hours in UA's newly fortified training grounds, pushing his body and his mind to their absolute limits. He meticulously studied All for One's vast, silent library of quirks within him, a silent pantheon of stolen abilities, each a whisper of a life consumed. He categorized them, analyzed their optimal applications, and experimented with their devastating synergies. He was an unwilling archivist of stolen power, his mind a living encyclopedia of villainy, charting the weapons of his captor. He devoured every piece of information he could find, obscure quirk research, theoretical physics textbooks that felt like arcane grimoires, even ancient philosophical texts on power and dominance, anything at all, that might offer a clue to severing the parasitic bond, or at least controlling the overwhelming power without succumbing to its inherent, corrupting evil. The task felt Sisyphean, a futile struggle against an inevitability he had brought upon himself the moment his trembling hand touched All for One's. Bakugo's suspicions, always present, a constant, simmering undercurrent between them, now solidified into a simmering, dangerous certainty. During a particularly intense sparring session, Izuku had just casually absorbed a full-power AP shot with impact recoil and sent it harmlessly into the sky, the air barely rippling around him. Bakugo skidded to a halt, his eyes narrowed into furious slits, steam rising from his palms, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "You're still holding back, Deku," Bakugo snarled, his voice a low, dangerous growl, filled with a mixture of rage and confusion. "Don't you dare lie to me. That ain't just impact recoil anymore. What the hell did you do? What did you get?" Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic hummingbird trapped in a cage. This was it. Bakugo, with his sharp instincts and innate understanding of power, was too close, closer than anyone else. It's just the evolution of my quirk, Kachan," Izuku stammered, forcing a nervous, apologetic smile, trying desperately to sound as unthreatening as possible. "I'm learning to combine it with my strength in new ways. It's complicated. The war. It pushed me to adapt, to grow beyond my limits. You know how quirks can suddenly evolve." Bakugo scoffed, a violent explosion sparking in his open hand, scorching the air between them. "Bullshit. Don't you dare give me that hero speak, you damn nerd. Your power feels different. It's wrong. It's not just strong, it's heavy. Like there's a damn black hole inside you, sucking the air out of the room. I can feel it. That feeling I get from you sometimes. It's like..." He trailed off, his brow furrowed in genuine frustration, his explosive temper momentarily sidelined by sheer bewilderment. He struggled to articulate the intangible aura of dread that Izuku sometimes emanated, the chilling sense of something ancient and terrible. "It's not hero power. It's something else." "Kachan, you're imagining things," Izuku said, trying to keep his voice steady, though his hands trembled slightly at his sides, betraying his inner turmoil. He subtly activated optical distortion around his body, trying to soften the dark, oppressive aura Bakugo was sensing, to make himself appear less threatening, more like the harmless Deku of old. "Imagining things?" Bakugo lunged, not to attack, but to grab Izuku's collar with surprising speed, pulling him close, their faces inches apart. His eyes, burning with a terrifying intensity, bored into Izuku's. I'm not imagining the way you looked at Shigaraki during the war. Like you understood him. Like you recognized something in that bastard. The way you intervened in that fight, too specific, too calculated. Izuku froze, every muscle tensing. His mind raced, a frantic search for an excuse, a plausible lie to explain away the undeniable truth in Bakugo's words.
I was just analyzing his quirk.
Trying to find a weakness. To help All Might. Don't you lie to me, you damn nerd. Bakugo's voice dropped, raw with accusation and a visceral sense of betrayal. You've changed, Deku. And it's not for the better. What the hell is going on with you? Tell me. His grip tightened, knuckles white. All for One's voice, a low, pleased hum, resonated with chilling clarity in Izuku's mind. He senses it. The purity of my power. He is perceptive. A worthy rival. But also, a dangerous one. He possesses a volatile quirk, difficult to acquire cleanly. Perhaps a subtle memory disruption or suggestion quirk could be employed. To dull his suspicions. To make him forget these inconvenient observations. Izuku recoiled internally from the chilling thought, fighting violently against the intrusive suggestions, the phantom tendrils of mind control. He couldn't. He wouldn't. Kachan, you're overreacting. We just went through a war. Everyone's on edge. That's all it is. He pulled away with a sudden, controlled burst of minor super strength, creating distance, retreating into himself, his eyes wide with a feigned innocence. Bakugo watched him, a dangerous glint in his eye, clearly unconvinced, a new, unsettling understanding settling upon his features. Izuku felt a cold dread, a tangible weight on his chest. Neutralized. The word hung in the air, a chilling premonition of what All for One intended for his oldest friend, his rival. He deflected the conversation, feigning exhaustion, mumbling about needing to study, retreating to the solitude of his room, the only place where he could drop his mask. He knew Bakugo wouldn't let this go. The confrontation had solidified a new, terrible layer to his secret. He began to notice even more subtle, unsettling changes in himself. His sleep was restless, plagued by fragmented, vivid dreams of 1,000 different lives, 1,000 different quirks, each a screaming echo of its original owner, a silent testament to a stolen existence. He would wake up with a jolt, gasping, the echoes of stolen memories, stolen abilities, swirling in his mind, bleeding into his own thoughts. He found himself thinking more like All for One, seeing situations in terms of strategic advantage, of exploitable weaknesses, of raw power dynamics. Empathy, while still present, a flickering flame in a gathering storm, was often overridden by a chilling, detached pragmatism, a cold logic that justified any means to an end. His analytical prowess, once a tool for understanding heroes and their glorious feats, was now instinctively dissecting everything and everyone. He observed his classmates' quirks, not just for their heroic applications, but for their vulnerabilities, for how they could be countered, for how they could be taken. He recoiled from these thoughts, recoiled from the monster he felt himself becoming, but they persisted, insidious whispers from the dormant demon within, promising ultimate power and freedom from his own moral torment. The world outside UA was a powder keg, primed to explode. Displaced civilians huddled in temporary shelters, economic hardship gnawed at the foundations of society, and the sheer terror of the villain's return fueled widespread public unrest. Small, localized vigilante groups, desperate and untrained, began to emerge, acting outside the hero system, often with brutal, unsanctioned methods, their justice swift and unforgiving. And on the flip side, new, more radical villain cells formed, capitalizing on the chaos, advocating for quirk supremacy or outright anarchy, preaching their twisted gospels of strength and domination. Izuku, on his increasingly lonely patrols, found himself mediating between these factions, often stepping in before full-blown riots erupted. He used his immense power to quell conflicts, but also his enhanced analytical skills, honed by All for One, to understand their grievances, their motivations, the raw desperation that drove them. All for One's voice, now a persistent undercurrent, would offer chillingly effective solutions, exploit their divisions, fuel their resentment. A fractured society is easier to control. Let them fight each other, then step in and claim the spoils. He resisted, stubbornly, his innate goodness fighting a losing battle against the insidious logic. He tried to unite, to de-escalate, to protect the vulnerable, even if it meant risking his cover, risking everything. He used his force field to separate brawling factions, his air cannon to create non-lethal deterrence, scattering angry crowds without harming them, and his kinetic vision to disarm threats before they escalated into bloodshed. He was a one-man peacekeeping force, a shadowy guardian in a world spiraling out of control, a fragile dam against a tsunami of chaos. All Might, now completely quirkless, a frail shadow of his former self, was stepping back from the front lines, focusing all his remaining energy on rebuilding public relations and advising the remaining heroes. But he watched Izuku with a growing unease, a flicker of suspicion in his tired eyes. He saw the rapid evolution of Izuku's power, its unsettling efficiency, and the subtle shift in Izuku's demeanor, a certain cold intensity in his eyes, a calculated stillness that was alien to the earnest, slightly clumsy boy he had known. One quiet evening, All Might invited Izuku to his small office at UA. The air was heavy with unspoken questions, with the ghosts of past battles and future fears. Young Midoriya, All Might began, his voice devoid of his usual boisterousness, the iconic laugh replaced by a weary sigh that carried the weight of the world. I understand that quirks can evolve, that they can manifest new aspects. But your growth, it's unprecedented. Even for a powerful emitter type like you appear to be. Can you explain it to me? Truly? His eyes, though tired, held a sharp, penetrating gaze that seemed to pierce through Izuku's very soul. Izuku's heart hammered like a frantic drum against his ribs, a desperate tattoo of fear. This was the moment. The truth, or a deeper, more dangerous lie. He chose the latter, desperation guiding his words, weaving a tangled web of half-truths. All Might. After the war. After the overwhelming power I felt during the fight with Shigaraki, amplified by Irie's quirk. Something awakened within me. A new level of control. It's like my quirk expanded, connected to something deeper, something dormant. I'm still struggling to understand it myself. It's overwhelming at times. He hoped the vagueness, the appeal to the unpredictable nature of quirk evolution, the sheer power he demonstrated, would be enough. He tried to make his eyes wide, earnest, reminiscent of his old self, a facade of his past innocence. All Might studied him intently, his eyes piercing, searching for a lie, for any flicker of deceit in the boy he had once considered a true successor. A deeper connection, you say? To what? And what about the feeling I sometimes get from you? A sense of immense weight. Like the air itself is being compressed around you, thick with raw power. It's reminiscent of something I've faced before. Something ancient and vast. He did not name All for One, he never would, but the implication hung heavy in the air between them, a phantom limb of his greatest battle, a chilling echo. It's a power that feels limitless. And that is a dangerous thing, young Midoriya. Izuku felt a cold sweat break out, trickling down his spine. All Might was too close, dangerously so. He had to divert him, to throw him off the scent. He desperately accessed a minor illusion quirk, optical distortion, one All for One had casually demonstrated once, capable of creating subtle, almost imperceptible visual anomalies in his aura. He focused it on his own spiritual presence, making it appear less menacing, less oppressive, trying to project a sense of overwhelming, yet pure, power, an untainted strength. He simultaneously activated a burst of minor regeneration to quickly heal a small, self-inflicted cut on his hand, making it seem like a natural, powerful side effect of his impact recoil-based quirk, a constant state of self-repair. The sheer power sometimes has physical effects, All Might, Izuku said, gesturing to his rapidly healing hand, hoping the visual distraction would work, would pull All Might's focus away from the true source of his unease. It feels like my body is constantly regenerating, adapting to the immense energy flowing through me. And the pressure you feel. Perhaps it's just the residual aura of that immense power, still settling within me after the shock of the war, after pushing myself beyond my limits. It's a lot to handle, even for me, as I learn to control it. He tried to convey a sense of vulnerability, the overwhelming burden of his new power, hoping it would mask the insidious truth. All Might stared at his hand, then back at Izuku's face, his brow furrowed in deep thought, a conflict raging within him. The raw power, the visual effect, the plausible explanation. He wanted to believe it. He needed to believe it. The idea of All for One's power being passed on, especially to someone he had championed as a successor for One for All, was unthinkable, a horrifying nightmare. The very thought was a poison, too bitter to swallow.
I see, All Might finally said, though a flicker of doubt remained, a tiny spark of unease that he couldn't quite extinguish in his eyes.
He sighed, a profound, weary sound. Be careful, young Midoriya. Such power. It can be a heavy burden. Don't let it consume you. True strength lies in your heart, not just your quirk. Always remember that. It is the core of heroism. He offered no further direct questions, but the conversation had left an unspoken tension, a fragile crack in their bond, a silent, terrible understanding hanging in the air. Izuku had survived the interrogation, but the deception was taking its toll, gnawing at his very soul. He was a constant battlefield, wrestling with All for One's influence, his own decaying morality, and the desperate, crushing need to maintain his facade, to play the hero while harboring a demon. Then, the whispers from the contained All for One grew louder, more insistent, no longer just suggestions but terrifyingly vivid projections, searing images into his mind. He saw a hidden facility, deep underground, flickering lights illuminating grotesque, mutated figures writhing in tanks, the chilling resonance of multiple quirks being brutally fused, the guttural screams of bioengineered horrors, their agony echoing in his thoughts. Nomu. They were making more Nomu. And something far worse, something more intelligent, more destructive, a true successor to the Nomu that had almost defeated All Might, a living weapon of mass destruction. The next stage, Izuku. The awakening. A new generation of tools. And their ultimate master. A new vessel, forged for a truly devastating power. A true weapon of unparalleled destruction. Stronger than Shigaraki, more loyal. Designed to usher in the new era. Izuku felt a wave of cold dread, a sickening lurch in his stomach that made him double over. All for One was planning something on an even grander scale than the war, a new, cataclysmic wave of terror to finally break society. And he, Izuku, was his unwitting informant, his involuntary witness to the dark machinations. He had to stop it. He had to find this facility, this horrifying lab, before it was too late. Before the ultimate weapon was unleashed. He began conducting his own investigation, using his hero patrols as a flimsy cover. He delved into the digital underworld, utilizing a low-level data scan quirk from All for One's arsenal, which felt horrifyingly invasive, like peering into someone's private thoughts without permission, to sift through encrypted communications, dark web forums, and the murky depths of underground rumors. He cross-referenced this information with his kinetic vision on the streets, sensing residual quirk energy in abandoned areas, tracking the subtle movements of known associates of the fragmented Paranormal Liberation Front. His search consumed him, driving him to the brink of exhaustion. His relentless pursuit led him to a desolate, abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of a forgotten city, shrouded in a pervasive aura of malevolent energy that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. This was it. He could feel it. The sickening hum of stolen quirks, the stench of decay and twisted science hanging heavy in the polluted air, a foul miasma of human cruelty. He entered the facility alone, a silent infiltrator cloaked in the deepest shadows, his UA uniform replaced by a dark, nondescript stealth suit, a crude imitation of the vigilantes he occasionally encountered in the lawless zones, his face hidden by a simple mask. All for One's presence within him was agitated, a furious storm of disapproval, a roaring torrent of rage. Foolish boy. You act alone? You expose yourself to such risks without my direct command? This recklessness will be your undoing. You are a weapon, Izuku, not a lone wolf. You are mine. Izuku ignored the internal roar, his jaw set, a grim determination hardening his features. He relied on his enhanced senses, using echolocation for mapping the dark, echoing corridors, sending out silent pulses that revealed the hidden layout, and a subtle sound-dampening quirk to muffle his footsteps, making him virtually undetectable, a ghost moving through the darkness. He moved like a shadow, a terrifying, silent predator in the labyrinthine complex, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, a desperate drumbeat against the silence of his impending confrontation. He found them. Scientists in blood-stained lab coats, their faces haggard, eyes gleaming with a mad fervor, shadowy figures bustling amidst grotesque machinery, and rows upon rows of horrifying experiments. Tanks filled with monstrous, unformed creatures, their bodies contorted in unnatural ways, their minds screaming in silent agony, a chorus of terror that only he, with all for one's senses, could truly hear, a symphony of suffering. And then, the horrifying centerpiece, a massive, pulsating chamber, at its heart a new, truly terrifying Nomu being forged. It was colossal, its skin stretched taut over bulging muscles that writhed beneath its flesh, its body a grotesque fusion of dozens of powerful quirks, its aura radiating pure, unadulterated destruction, a palpable wave of malice. It was designed to be all for one's ultimate weapon, a replacement for Shigaraki, perhaps, or a new, final, devastating enforcer that would truly shatter the world. And then, he saw him. Dr. Garaki, all for one's twisted protege, overseeing the final stages of the process, a look of mad triumph distorting his features, a maniacal glee in his eyes as he admired his monstrous creation. He cackled, rubbing his hands together. Almost ready, my masterpiece. Soon, the master will truly reshape this world. Izuku felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage, a furious inferno that transcended all for one's influence, burning away the pragmatism, the cynicism. This was evil. Unspeakable evil. This was what his power had truly done in the hands of a madman, this was the consequence of all for one's existence. All for one's voice was a chilling calm, a sudden, deliberate shift in tone, a serpent's lure, trying to coax him, to manipulate him. A powerful creation, Izuku. A masterpiece of quirk evolution. Observe its composition. Its weaknesses. Perhaps. A worthy addition to your own collection. Imagine the possibilities. The raw power you could wield if you truly embraced it. Izuku recoiled from the suggestion, a wave of nausea washing over him, bitter bile rising in his throat. Take its quirk? From this monstrosity born of torture and desecration? Become a part of this grotesque science? Never. He felt a sudden, fierce resolve, a defiance that burned brighter than any darkness all for one could offer, a desperate, final stand for his own humanity. He made a decision. A reckless, desperate one. He would destroy this facility. All of it. He would use all for one's power, the very source of this evil, to dismantle its creation, to burn it away from existence. He burst from the shadows, a furious whirlwind of green energy, his fabricated hero persona momentarily discarded in the face of true villainy. He unleashed a barrage of air cannon blasts, aimed not at the Nomu, but at the support systems, the power conduits, the very structure of the building. He combined it with minor super strength to tear through reinforced steel beams, ripping pipes and cables from the walls with terrifying ease, and impact recoil to nullify the scientists' desperate, meager quirks, sending them flying like ragdolls, screaming as they crashed into equipment. Chaos erupted. Alarms blared, a piercing, deafening shriek that echoed through the cavernous space, a symphony of imminent destruction. The scientists scattered, screaming, tripping over equipment, their faces contorted in terror. Garaki, startled, spun around, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning, gut-wrenching horror as he recognized the green-haired student, the boy he knew was supposed to be all for one's heir. Midoriya? What are you doing here? How? How could you possibly? Garaki shrieked, his voice laced with pure, unadulterated shock, a high-pitched sound of utter betrayal. This is the Master's sacred ground. His ultimate plan. Izuku didn't answer. He lunged, not to attack Garaki directly, but to destroy the central chamber, the pulsating heart of this horror. He channeled a monstrous amount of energy discharge into his hands, combining it with kinetic booster for unparalleled, explosive force. His veins pulsed with raw power, his body screaming in protest, but he pushed through the agony. It was a terrifying, unstable surge of power, one he could barely control, a fraction of the true all-for-one unleashed with furious defiance, uncontrolled but aimed. The blast was cataclysmic. A blinding flash of white-hot light consumed the chamber, scorching the very air. This was followed by a deafening roar that shook the entire complex to its foundations, sending vibrations through the very earth, causing cracks to spiderweb across the concrete floor. The chamber exploded, the monstrous Nomu within it disintegrating into a cloud of ash, twisted metal, and agonizing, echoing screams that were abruptly cut short. The energy rippled through the facility, destabilizing everything, causing the very walls to crack and buckle, showering them with debris. All for One's voice was a furious, echoing scream in his mind, a primal rage that threatened to shatter Izuku's consciousness, to tear him apart from the inside out, louder and more insistent than it had ever been since its containment. Fool! You destroyed it. You destroyed my masterpiece. My ultimate weapon. This is unforgivable, Izuku. You will regret this defiance. I will break you. I will make you pay for this. Izuku ignored the mental assault, his body trembling, battered by the sheer power he had just unleashed, on the verge of collapse. He knew the consequences. He had just declared war on All for One, not just externally, but within his own soul, a battle that would determine his very existence, his very sanity. Garaki, covered in dust and debris, his glasses askew, stared at Izuku, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning, gut-wrenching horror. You have All for One? But how? The Master. He's imprisoned. This is impossible. You are supposed to be his vessel. His heir. His voice rose to a hysterical, desperate pitch, as if his entire world had just shattered. Izuku looked at him, his eyes burning with a dark, terrifying resolve, a cold fire that belied his shaking body, a defiant glint within their green depths. He is. And he's staying that way. This ends here. Your twisted experiments. Your abominations. All of it. I will not let you create another monster. He wasn't sure if he was talking to Garaki, or to the dormant demon within him, or to the very concept of evil he now embodied. He activated his kinetic vision once more, despite the throbbing pain behind his eyes, scanning for any other hidden labs, any other horrifying creations, any other secrets that Garaki might have concealed. He found several, smaller ones, dedicated to researching quirk fusing and human experimentation, and systematically destroyed them, leaving nothing but ruin in his wake. As he finished, the distant wail of sirens pierced the night, growing rapidly louder, closer. Heroes. They had arrived, drawn by the massive explosion, by the telltale signs of a high-level villain engagement. He had to disappear, to vanish into the shadows before they could identify him. He activated Light Step and Kinetic Booster to their maximum, a green blur in the shadows, leaving the ruined facility behind, disappearing into the night as the first hero spotlight swept across the devastated complex, revealing the scale of the destruction. He knew this would cause a massive investigation, a new wave of chaos, a profound mystery for the heroes to unravel, raising more questions than answers. But he had stopped it. He had stopped a new generation of monsters, saved countless lives from an unimaginable future of terror. He returned to UA under the cover of darkness, battered, exhausted, but with a grim satisfaction that tasted like ash in his mouth. He had struck a blow against the very source of his power, against the darkness he contained. But he also knew he had pushed All for One to its breaking point. The internal struggle would only intensify, a constant, agonizing war for his soul, a battle he might not win. All for One's voice was a chilling, relentless presence now, a constant torment in his mind, louder than ever, an unceasing torrent of fury and threats. You have sealed your fate, Izuku. You chose to defy me. And now, you will pay the price. I will break you. I will consume you. And then, I will rise again, stronger than ever, fueled by your rebellion. You cannot escape me. This war is only beginning, and it is within you. Izuku collapsed onto his bed, staring at the ceiling, his body aching, every muscle screaming in protest, his mind a maelstrom of fear and defiance. He had saved the world from a new wave of Nomu, but in doing so, he had invited a far more personal apocalypse. The shadows over UA were long, stretching from the ruined cities to the depths of his own tormented soul, casting a pall over his very existence. And he knew, with a chilling certainty, that the next battle would not be against a villain outside, but against the ultimate villain within himself, a struggle for his very identity. His isolation was now complete. He was truly alone in his fight, a hero battling a demon he could not escape.